Good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames Conference Board to order. And we'll start off with roll call.
Ames City Council.
Present.
Here.
Story County Board of Supervisors.
Here.
Ames Community School District.
Here.
Gilbert Community School District. Nevada School District. I think Bob.
Present.
Okay, there. United School District.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to item number 2. Everyone, I presume, received a copy of the minutes. Is there any corrections to the minutes? Otherwise, if there are none, I would entertain a motion approving the minutes. Again, we have 3 voting entities: school board, council, and supervisors. So we would need a motion from one body and a second from a second body.
So moved.
Second.
All right, school board moved and supervisor seconded. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right, move on to item number 3. It's time for a public hearing on the Ames City Assessor's proposed budget for FYE 2025. That's 2026, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes, you are correct.
I just noticed that.
25 to 26, yes.
Yep. All right. So I declare the public hearing on the proposed budget to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address the conference board regarding the budget? Seeing and hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. And I've been informed by the assessor that no comments written or oral have been received outside of the meeting. With that said, is there any questions or comments relative to the budget prior to us approving it? Entertain a motion to approve the proposed budget.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, moved by city council, seconded by supervisors. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, discussion and setting a policy for a minimum ending fund balance for city assessor's budget. I'll turn it over to Sherry. You want to just do a quick review? This is something we brought up at our last meeting, and I asked that you put on this agenda.
Yes. So I did contact Corey with finance, and he has told me that he does not have an official written policy that he knows of that has been adopted. It is just in what has been carried forward as part of the fund statements. So I looked through that, and like I said before, generally I like to do ending fund balance somewhere between 30 and 35% of the prior year's budget, so that we have some room before the taxes are collected so we can continue to function the office. So
And where do you stand right now? You're about 35%, is that correct?
it's about 35% right now. Yes.
On the basis of this budget being adopted, right?
Yes.
Okay. Questions? I think we're just looking for helping Sherry have some kind of idea from the conference board on a policy in terms of what, maybe a minimum budget amount that she would include. Maybe 30%, 35%, something that the board's comfortable with. And again, I applaud Sherry. She's drawn a lot of her reserve fund down to make up this budget. So you're getting close to what a target might be if the board approves.
Just wanted to ask what the time is in between when the taxes come in and the budget year starts.
Generally, it's 3 to 4 months before we start getting tax dollars in. And since I am a single budget, I don't have anywhere to borrow funds from. So I am my own entity. And therefore, if I don't have funds there, I can't pay anything.
Mhm.
So that's why we usually like to see about 30, 35% just to get us through that first 3 or 4 months.
Makes total sense.
Are we talking about a hard and fast policy or just direction and a goal? I'd like to know.
It's up to the board. I think that, we could have it as a policy. The point of the policy can always be changed. Unless you want to just give her some general direction, but then it's nothing she's, quote, bound to, but I don't think that she's going to change from what she currently operates.
I'm comfortable with the 30 and 30 to 35% as kind of a goal, but I don't think we need to have a hard and fast policy because things happen. Yeah, and I think that then it's just reflected that the conference board was comfortable with
You
direct.
want to make a
direction.
motion on not just what's I guess some direction without setting a policy? Or you're concerned that the motion would be considered construed as a policy?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, let me do this way. Is everyone comfortable with giving guidance of 30 to 35% for ending fund balance without setting a hard and fast policy? Okay,
So I don't know what this means actually. So we operate within rules and or what you call them, I don't really care. But I think you're astute to ask for some guidance. And I don't know that we're actually doing you a favor by leaving things ambiguous. And so if you're wanting a policy to create some guidelines, I think what you proposed makes an immense amount of sense. And I think we should have a policy. And if it needs to change over time, then this board can come back and change that. But leaving it ambiguous doesn't help you any. So I'll go ahead and move that we create a policy that the assessor maintains. And what do you want to call this? Like a
Minimum ending fund balance.
minimum ending fund balance of between 30 and 35% of the last year's budget.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, all right. So what are the implications on this in terms of, is that you have to maintain it through the entire year? Or that's part of your budget?
Well, I would expect that when we end the budget year, then whatever that minimum fund balance is should be within 30 to 35% of, so it's a carryover. So we always have about 30% of the funds in the bank so that we don't ever run out, basically.
That's my understanding also.
Yeah.
It's make clear that we're not saying that you have to have 30 to 35% always in the bank account.
Right, right. But when I do the budget, my ending fund balance should be no less than the 30%
Yep.
ending fund balance of the previous year's budget.
Okay,
So I have a question. None of us have a guaranteed ending fund balance, and none of us know what the next year is going to look like. While I understand wanting to have a 35% ending fund balance, I don't know that it's realistic to say there will be and to lock the board in to that when we don't know. We have no idea what's going to happen this year, next year, the next year.
Let's say there's an unexpected expense and it's a large one. Is sure going to have to lay off somebody to get to a 30% balance. That's just an example. I think there can be, I understand liking a policy. I think there can be some unintended consequences because we don't know what's going to happen during the year. That's why I was thinking guidance and direction, in general, but not a hard and fast policy. A hard and fast policy is, I got to make 30%. What do I have to do to make that? And yeah, I just don't.
This
I'm
is
here
the
for it.
difference between her budget and ours. So this is a little more contained. You're absolutely right. All of us have to deal with our own sort of budgetary procedures. But I think it makes some sense. And I think you're raising really good points, Linda, that there could be something unforeseen. And then you've got some cushion to start with, and you can always come back if the sky falls and there needs to be, for example, the city would loan money, in essence, do a short-term loan. I don't remember us doing that. It's possible we could do that. But there are budgetary practices about having rainy day funds, and so that one administrator to another will have some consistency in their budgetary practices. So I think it makes some sense. But to your point, we have the opportunity, if there's an emergency, to come back and be of help.
Yeah, I would say too, and it's not a maximum, it's not a cap either, right? So a person could set more aside if they saw a year that would be coming, that would be, a challenge or something, you could have more than your minimum fund balance. But I don't see it as something that would be too limiting where, she wouldn't have asked us to put it in place either. I feel like, or, she wouldn't have asked us for guidance on it.
I guess my concern is it ties our hands if for whatever reason we are concerned about a higher ending fund balance and we want to pull back or we want to reduce, not to zero, but if there's some reason where it doesn't make sense to have that much of a fund balance for whatever reason, our hands are tied.
Well, no,
And we have to.
we could change the policy.
Yeah.
We would just, if we saw some reason we had to change that fund balance limit, then we would.
That year?
I mean, there's really no consequence, right? It's our own policy, so,
We can change it whenever we need.
right.
We have them in place for city funds.
Mhm.
Sidewalk is a good example.
And it
Yeah.
hasn't ever hurt us. I guess I've never seen it to limit us or hurt us.
And I think, Sherry's really good at budgeting and she's been doing great in her role. But what if someone new comes in and doesn't understand this 3 to 4 month gap of needing to budget for before the taxes come in? I think a 30% minimum would guarantee us some safety in that sort of situation.
Not that we want you to go anytime
No.
soon, but
Definitely not.
All right, everyone understand the motion? We'll try this as a, why don't you just go ahead and call each entity, Dan? Like city council, school board, and the supervisor.
City Council,
I.
Board of Supervisors,
No.
Ames Community School District,
I.
Nevada School District, maybe he dropped, Gilbert School District, United School District. Let me see if Joe dropped.
So while you're looking, I don't remember that we've actually ever had a vote.
I know,
This is
I-
sort of out for us. And so does each entity have a single vote?
3 votes, for example, on council, it'd have to be, at least
Can you ask him to unmute?
majority of those in council. And then you have to have at least majority of the school board. So,
One.
Susan says that he's on and self-muted. She's going to ask him to.
Oh.
okay,
Joe, are you there?
This is Joe here. Audio is really poor on my end, so I'm sorry if I'm being spoken to and not responding.
No, that's okay. Did you hear the discussion about the motion for a budget ending funding balance?
Yes, I did.
Can you vote, please?
Aye.
Okay.
all right, motion passes. All right, unfinished business, update on assessment appeal hearings.
So last week, I was, along with the attorney, Brett Ryan, outside counsel that was present. We did have the hearing before the district court judge for the 2 Walmart cases and the Sam's Club case. Just to let you know, we were set for a 5-day trial. It went about 2.5 days because they decided that they would just go through one appeal from each side, or one appraisal from each side for one property, because the appeal or the appraisals, the methodology is the same in all 3. So they just went through the one and said this applies to all 3. We did have quite a bit of time with our appraiser, a day and a half. The other 2 were each about a half a day. And there is going to be a written summary that is sent to the judge. And then also he will make his decision sometime after that. So we probably will not know that decision until, I'm going to say, at least June. Because written summations aren't due until, I believe, April 30th is what they said. 30 days after the transcript is available is what he said. So, and they didn't think it would be ready for at least a couple of weeks. So, and then after that, I will definitely let everybody know. I'll send out an email. We will also have to be sending a letter to everybody to let you guys know what happened if they decided to go with our appraiser or their appraiser or somewhere in the middle. Just to give you an idea, if we were to lose completely and the judge sides with the other side with Walmart, we stand to lose $407,465. And that would be about $123,000 to the city, $183,000 to the school districts, $57,000 to the county, and about $44,000 to all the other entities, including my office and all the other smaller entities that get a little piece. So overall, it's probably going to cost us somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 between the outside counsel and the appraisals and all the court appearance and everything. So, you know, even if we break even, we're still going to be ahead of what we would have if we would have lost completely. So, and that's for the 23 property tax, 23 assessment property taxes, which would be coming out this fall. So.
And so if they lose, they can still appeal, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, they would still have an additional appeal step that they could do.
And the 400, is that per building or is that collective? Like
No, that's for all three. Yes, that's for all three. So.
I know
Yeah.
you said before this is a thing.
So in the past few years, for the most part, Walmart has won their cases. In recent year and a half, Walmart has not won. So we've all kind of been using the same appraiser, and he seems to be doing very well. And in fact, they lost Marshall, they lost Dallas, they lost one other one just in the last 6 months. They've gotten rulings back for those. And Walmart has already appealed further with Marshall County. So.
I don't want to know any details, but are there opportunities for your office to negotiate on this matter, or does it have to be resolved through the courts?
We do try to negotiate if there is some reason that we can see that there could be something to negotiate. We have negotiated stuff in the past. This is just one of those that they don't want to come up at all, and we don't feel we should go down. So that's kind of where we're sitting with that one.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, any new business to bring before the conference board?
No.
All right, conference board comments. City council, anything tonight? Supervisors? School districts? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you. Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for March 11th to order. Welcome, everybody. And Council, I'll bring your attention to the fact that from an amended agenda, an item number 6 has been withdrawn, and item 10, that request from Ames Main Street should actually read Ames from Alliance. And we've added an item at the end of consent, which is a resolution approving plan specifications for a 23-24 CDBG infrastructure program. And then the last item is on 36B. We had a couple of dates that need to be edited for the 5/15 days. So those are the changes. So with that, move on to consent. Is there anyone that wants to move and pull any item from consent tonight? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve consent as amended on the amended agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Speedy Hansen,
Aye.
Rollins,
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Barton,
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. Move on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. Ask people to try and limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Is there anyone who wants to address council under public forum? You just introduce yourself and you may begin.
Yeah, my name is Charles Pearson. I'm president of Experience Black Iowa, and we're currently working on a project identifying Central Iowa Green Book stops and Black experiences. And this is probably the largest African American travel and tourism undertaking in the history of our state. Our site inventory begins with Prairie Rivers, Lincoln Highway, and Jefferson Highway, and they already have Green Book stops, which includes, I want to say, the Martin House here, but it's like some other stops that goes with that. Today, I'm looking for permission from the mayor and council to work with the Ames Historic Preservation Commission and the Ames Human Relations Commission to identify and inventory the city's 20th and 21st century African American civil rights sites and stops to be part of the Central Iowa project. I think what's unique about the city of Ames, a lot of times when you look at like Waterloo, you look at Des Moines, places like that when it comes to Black history. But for some reason, Central Iowa is kind of like the Black capital of Iowa. If you take Des Moines out the equation, if you look specifically at the city of Ames, a lot of the things they've done, they have an airport named after somebody African American. I think you guys have the only Main Street district in Iowa that has identified African American stops or properties. Y'all have a community school district that has I want to say a gymnasium named after an African American. But more importantly, when it comes to partnering with the African American Museum of Iowa, Lincoln Highway does that when it comes to connecting to the state capitol and Center Street in Des Moines. Jefferson Highway does that. And so we feel like this is a great opportunity to work with the city along with Prairie Rivers and other partners to maybe make this the Black capital of our state. And when it comes to travel and tourism opportunity, it'll be the first of its kind in the state. And so that's my pitch.
Well, thank you. I think if you could just chat with Brian Phillips, he's in the back. He's an assistant city manager, and he'll get contact information and see what might be needed from our side of the equation. All right.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public forum. We'll move on to item number 33, update on applications received for North Ames voluntary annexation of multiple properties between George Washington Carver and Hyde Avenue.
Good evening, City Council. We're here to report on the status of the annexation process that was initiated back in January of 2025. If you recall, the property that we have labeled as the Borgmeyer property, developers of that property had submitted an application for annexation of that land, plus some additional lands to the east that extended towards Hyde. And at that time, we offered some opportunities to the council to define the annexation territory for North Ames to effectuate basically the planned boundaries of the city for this area. And at that time, you chose to initiate not only the Borgmeyer related lands, but also to ask staff to reach out to people that had previously had covenants for annexation agreed upon in the past. So there was a few of those properties, 2 of those properties on Hyde Avenue. And then there are the properties related to the Ames Golf and Country Club and the Iron subdivision, which is the residential lots that were created about 7 or 8 years ago. Since that time, we have received applications on Hyde from the people that had signed the covenant. So both Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation and the Sturgis family returned their annexation applications. And we also received an additional application from the owner of the Hayden's Preserve development in that area to fill in another leftover parcel. As we reached out to the Country Club and to the Irons, knowing that this was a little unique for the area, staff did hold an informational meeting at the Country Club in February to explain the history of what was expected and how the annexation process would proceed. And since that time, we have not secured enough of the property owners' applications to proceed with what's called a voluntary consenting annexation for the area. So we don't have a full 80% of the 400 acres that council had directed us to move forward with. So we came back tonight for a status update and to see if there's additional direction that council wants to provide to staff. So I think what we encountered was that as we reached out to the owners to the north, many people were unaware that they had inherited this obligation for annexation that was agreed upon by the Country Club in 2014. Later, the subdivision that was approved reinforced that utility extensions and other things would be required at a later date upon annexation to the city and at the direction of council. So as we looked at this, we reached out to a number of people, explained what those standards were, but again, many people have not submitted those applications. So our legal department believes our covenants requiring them to voluntarily annex at the direction of council are valid. The only way to enforce that, if they're not turning those in, is to go to court to seek an order for enforcement of those covenants. And that would take some time. So that's why we're here tonight, to get direction on whether to proceed with that original direction, which is in line with alternative 1 that's described. Alternative 2 talks about splitting the process to allow for essentially the Borgmeyer and the Hyde Avenue properties, which are shown in blue on this diagram on the screen, to proceed in parallel with action related to the Country Club and the Irons subdivision. And then the third alternative we presented was the possibility of offering a partial incentive related to the city's tax rates that's authorized by state statute. The idea behind that was if there was a short window where people would choose to submit essentially within the next 3 weeks, it wouldn't change the timeline that was projected for the Borgmeyer. And if that incented them to participate, then we could move forward on the original timeline. We don't have a history of offering that incentive, so it would be a new thing to do. But in this case, it seemed like it was possibly a viable option to move things forward in order to be consistent with council's original direction. So since that time, I think you've received a number of emails about this from people. We did receive a letter today from an attorney representing the Golf and Country Club, asserting some issues that they have with the agreement and its validity, and then a number of other concerns that they have just related to timing and other factors about annexation. So we're here tonight to, again, seek direction from you to continue on the path we're on, or is there a different direction that you would like us to take?
Thanks, Kelly. Questions?
Kelly, could you give us, and those who are watching, some history? Maybe Steve, this is something you want to add in as well. But we're not starting with a blank slate here with this situation. There's history, and could you walk us through that as it pertains to the source of this agreement?
Absolutely. So in 2014, the Country Club approached the city and said that they were interested in pursuing a residential development adjacent or as part of their property, so adjacent to the club. The club did not at that time immediately touch the city, so they proposed that the city waive its extra jurisdictional powers of subdivision. So we have a subdivision authority within 2 miles of the city. You have every right as the city to require public improvements and all sorts of features, just as you would in the city. So they asked if we would waive those requirements so that the subdivision could occur before the land could be annexed into the city for development consistent with city standards. So in 2014, the council consented to waive full improvement standards such as connect to a sanitary sewer system, and allowed for the country club to proceed. With that agreement, it included the provision that you would annex to the city upon request of the city at the time that it was in the city's interest for that to occur. So the subdivision was later approved, I think in 2017, to actually create the plat with the lots that eventually got built upon. But that's the history of why there's an agreement, because the city's had subdivision control by state law over this land because it's within 2 miles of the city.
And Steve, you can chime in for some historical context. I think this was the last time that I saw Larry Curtis. So he came to us on behalf of the country club and made this request to basically get some flexibility to allow this development. He wasn't just being a lawyer here. He also had a personal dream of seeing housing develop at the country club. And so this was an accommodation that we made. My concern at the time was how would property owners, how would people who are buying lots be informed that this would eventually be an issue? And here we are today. This is like the ghost of Christmas future for me. And it would be fun if we had more time, but we've got a full agenda to go back and play the tape of some of the dialogue in that meeting, because we were talking about these very issues in 2014. And so I have dialogued with several of the owners, and I asked them, were they informed about this obligation? And I have yet to have anyone who said that they were informed, that this was somehow a surprise. And I can't tell you how frustrating that is, because nobody wanted to create some kind of gotcha moment or a surprise. The goal was so that buyers of lots there would be informed and they could make a business decision about what this would be. So I just think some historical context. And Steve, is there anything else, or other council members who were there, is there anything else that you think would be helpful to add to that? Because that history is important.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I remember that too. Actually, 2016 is when it came back to us for final plat, and we talked about it then. I pulled up the minutes, and you did ask that very question. How can homeowners be made aware before they purchase properties? And you encouraged the developer to make sure that that information got passed along. But of course, I guess it did not, is what we're hearing. But I hear you. I think to have negotiated in good faith at that time, and then now to hear some of the responses, and I know the homeowners maybe weren't made aware, but I do find that interesting.
And the challenge, and I'll just 1 second on this and then we'll move on. It makes it hard for us in future situations. Let's say we're to have the same situation, and the developer wants us to be flexible, and we want to see houses built, so we want to go along. But this is sort of a good lesson for us about what it means to be flexible, and how do we sort of see those things play out in a way that we don't have this situation happening today. Thanks for that, Kelly.
Other questions?
Mayor, I have a question.
Please.
So what does the email that we received today from the lawyer for the Golf and Country Club have to do with our deliberation tonight? Does that factor into the discussion that we will be having, or is it a separate issue? Because it does seem to suggest that some of the questions that we may be trying to answer will be moot. If it is indeed correct.
I guess I would let Mr. Lambert respond to that question. I assume you're talking about the assertion that the agreement is invalid.
I am.
So Mark's coming up to respond to that.
And just for everyone's awareness, this came in like sometime this morning, I believe. So, I mean, in fairness to our legal counsel, there hasn't been much time to look into it and for counsel to read through it and consider it.
And I saw it about 1:30 today. And, but I did look at it. I read the letter, I looked at the statute, I read the court decision that was, that mentioned in the letter. I also researched other court decisions this afternoon. So, I mean, I'm convinced that the covenant is still valid and effective, despite what the letter says. The letter says that cites an Iowa code section saying that if you've got an interest in property that has to be, recorded and then has to be renewed every 10 years. It's clear from a subsequent, I mean, it's not clear from the case that they sent me, but there's a subsequent Iowa Court of Appeals decision from 2020 that made it clear that that statute only applies to an interest in real estate. So an interest would be an ownership interest. It would be a right of first refusal. It would be an option to purchase. Those are interests in real estate. What we're talking about, an annexation here is not an interest in real estate. It's not some kind of an ownership that we might have in it. So I don't think that legal analysis is correct. And there's another Iowa Code section 614.24. It says covenants are good for 21 years. And so we're still well within that 21-year period. So I believe that the covenant is valid.
Thank you. Other questions, Gloria?
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council before we open up public input?
Question for Kelly. I'm always interested in finding ways. Are there some middle ground opportunities? And so, if we were to go forward with annexation, what would the implications be in terms of our expectations for tying into city services?
So I think there's kind of two parts to this whole issue. One is just the timing of coming into the city, and then there's this second tier of expectations related to extension of utilities. So once you're in the city, the agreement also has provisions that say the water service is to be switched from Xenia to Ames. The country club building itself, the country club is excluded from that. This is for the homeowners. At the time this was approved, the territory rights were already purchased by the developer. So the switch is essentially changing out a valve connection for where they tie into the Xenia main at GW Carver and switching it to a connection to the Ames main that would have to come up to that area. The more difficult or costly thing is going to be the extension of sanitary sewer. We did not require, as the city, that a dry sewer be put in place at the time of construction, and that was deferred to allow for the development to occur and then for the installation of that sewer at a time when that was required by the city of Ames. So again, it doesn't say exactly when that is triggered. We wouldn't expect that to occur until the sanitary sewer gets to the north side of that property with the Borgmeyer development. And then from there, the agreement would say they being the homeowners need to design and install that facility to city specifications.
So people who have existing houses, they installed septic systems onto their property. And I think that there may be a couple of lots that are still in development phase. Is that correct?
There's two.
There's two. And
They're under construction.
They're under construction.
Yeah.
And so I assume that those septics have been put in place, but certainly not used. So you've got relatively new septic systems. And so would there be an impending, I mean, what is the most likely scenario in terms of when they would have to tie into city septic systems?
I don't know that I really have an answer to that. I don't know the full development plans for Borgmeyer and its phasing yet. That's stuff we'll learn throughout this year in terms of what the developer seeks in terms of its entitlements and when what different parts would be constructed. Northwest corner isn't going to be the first phase of the project. I know that, but whether that's 2 years out or 3 years out or 10, I don't know the answer to that.
So it's not something that's going to happen imminently.
No, and I think the council has complete discretion to work with that neighborhood to come up with an agreed time for that implementation of that sewer facility.
So that would be, and I don't want to negotiate from the dais, but it would be an example. This is a lever that we could pull a little bit to create some flexibility. So if people were concerned about having that cost to tie in and those expenses, we could create some flexibility in terms of when those tie-ins take place.
Yeah, and I think it already is discretionary on your part, just like the execution of the covenant. So once they're in the city and once the sewer line gets adjacent to that territory, staff would look at you as council and say, is now when you want us to approach the homeowners and say that they need to extend this sewer line and connect to it. So you could put more parameters on that and spell it out in clearer terms, but right now it's at the discretion of the council. Obviously, if we're not expecting it immediately, we understand people just invested in their homes, but septic systems are going to need to be replaced at some point. The sanitary sewer system does need to go in at some point in the future as well. And then once it's in, if you did nothing else, once it's in within normal state law parameters, if you wanted to default to that, once it's in, no one could replace their septic system. They would have to connect to the sewer. So you could let someone stay on a septic system, and then when it fails or needs to be replaced or substantially upgraded, the county won't issue a new permit, and they would then have to switch over and connect to the sewer system that's been installed.
And the reason I've dwelled on this, and thank you for the answers, is that this has been sort of the parade of horribles, that if we're annexed in, then we've got to tie into this city sewer, and there is some flexibility that we could provide.
There is. I think it's one of the bigger interests of the city is the sewer system over septic systems within the watersheds of the city.
Right.
So it is important to us, but you have discretion on its timing.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions? Kelly, in a letter that this attorney sent, it stated that concern with water sewers and fire protection. And now I heard I just heard you say was that's a matter of just turning a valve on once the water main gets up there. So is it correct that the water main that's been put in already in that is adequate to provide the needs, and also the water service from that main to the houses is still adequate? That would not need to be changed. It's primarily the sanitary sewer. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's no service to sewer that exists. The water services would remain as is. So the intent is the mains that are in the ground were to meet city standards. They're supposed to be 8-inch water mains to city standards and have fire hydrants per SUDOS. So that is installed per our requirements. And then the water that flows in there is Xenia. Our understanding is the main on GW Carter has fairly high pressure. It's the same main that's serving development in the Dank Bar farms at the Bluffs. So it should be of adequate service at this point in time for fire protection, just as it is for those homes. But yeah, so when I say just a valve, it's not that we're replacing water mains and services, it's making a connection to a city system.
And the statement in the letter would need to be verified by the fire chief or whoever.
So what?
Not here tonight. The point is, I'm just saying that would be something to be worth.
Right. So what the mayor's saying is the letter suggests that there's inadequate pressure in the system. I have no evidence of that. I've never seen that. It's actually contrary to my understanding of the operation of the Xenia facility. So I'm not familiar with any thoughts that there's not enough pressure for fire protection.
All right. But the good news is you're not taking out and replacing water mains.
Yeah, the sewer is by far the more disruptive issue.
All right, we'll open up public comment, and I apologize if anyone signed up on the iPad. My link is not working, so we'll just go ahead. If someone is interested in coming up and offering comments, You're welcome to do so. And if you could seek to limit your comments to 3 to 4 minutes, I would appreciate it. Daryl, go ahead and start us off.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff, I thought I'd get up here right away so I could get this over with and sit back and relax and listen to others. My name is Daryl Veggie. I live at 5527 Irons Way with my wife Joyce. We are one of 17 households in that area. And given that, I'm going to present a petition of 16 of those households that are opposing the annexation. One of the members decided not to sign, didn't say she was for or against, but decided not to sign the petition. I am here to speak against the annexation. I'm not in favor of it. 20 years ago, I sat where you guys are sitting in the council. I got to make the decisions that you guys are all making right now. Some are easy, some are difficult, some are contentious. One comes to mind for me that was particularly contentious. We thought it was a pretty innocuous thing we're forwarding, and it turned out once the public found out, it was a firestorm. So we did the right thing, I think. We turned around and we said, this isn't going to work. And today, that reversal still stands. So I hope you will consider thinking that you don't have to do the annexation, at least now. So why am I opposed to this annexation? Well, you sprung this on us pretty quickly. I think it was in January when the 14th meeting, when this came about. And on February 3rd, roughly, we were notified and said, turn in your voluntary numbers here by February 28th. So that's pretty quick to be thinking about something as major as an annexation. My second reason is we are not an island. Even after the Borgmeyer annexation takes place, we will not be an island. So there's really no requirement for us to be annexed at this time. As we were talking about, Mr. Diekman mentioned about the sewer system. That's a huge thing for us. You know, telling us we need to pull out our septic systems and replace it with sewer from the city. I can't think that the bill for each household is going to be under $30,000. That's a huge investment for us to be doing. And the septic systems are only 5 to 8 years old. Some two vacant houses haven't even been used yet. So everything is in working order. It's working well. We get them checked every year and serviced. So I think our septic systems are in pretty darn good shape, and nothing's going to be improved by a sewer for now. The staff admittedly says that we could expect to pay 20 to 25% higher taxes, property taxes. That's pretty exciting, I think. What do we get out of it? We're not getting anything out of it. We have adequate services already, and this would do nothing to improve our situation. We get water from Xenia. We have our own septic systems, which I said are in great shape. We get fire protection from the Franklin Township or Gilbert, which is pretty close. Police, the county sheriff. And in our case, for Irons Way, ours is a private street. So when it comes time for repairs or snow plowing, we're on our own. So no city services there. So the city manager is giving you 3 alternatives. You know, I think for the Borgmeyer people, it's a win-win situation. It's a win for the city. Borgmeyer requested it. It's a win for them and the developers. For Irons Way, Irons Court, this is a losing situation. It might be a win for the city, but this is a win-loss thing. We're going to pay a lot of money for nothing we need. So I think you as council members are pretty spirited free thinkers. I hope you are, and realize that there's really more than those 4 alternatives, or 3. So I hope you'll reject all 3 of those alternatives and think about a 4th one. And that is to, I'm going to read it, what I wrote. Proceed with the immediate annexation of the Borgmeyer land. That'll make them happy. Delay annexation of Irons Court, Irons Way, and the Ames Country Club indefinitely or until we become an island. In the meantime, be looking for ways to make this a win-win situation. So I hope you'll all vote to do the right thing, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Daryl. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Ron DeYoung. I live in Irons Court. Actually, a lot of what Daryl has said, we've been working together. I'm a resident of Irons Court, and then I'm also a member of the Country Club Board of Directors. And really what Daryl has said really sums up a lot of the feeling within the all three groups. And just to kind of hit the points, while I don't have a signed petition, our neighborhood has met and are united against annexation under the current condition drafted by the Ames City Council. Again, speed of annexation came as a surprise, along with some questions surrounding the 2014 annexation agreement and its legal merit. While we acknowledge annexation will eventually occur, we are concerned about the financial impact of our residents, some of whom are on fixed incomes. We've been told to expect our property taxes to increase by 20% upon annexation, and in addition, the cost of $20,000 to $30,000 to hook up to city sewer and water. The Irons Way and Irons Court neighborhoods are less than 7 years old, with new septic systems and water provided by Zinnia Water District. We currently have excellent fire protection provided by Franklin Township Fire Department, and public safety is provided by the Story County Sheriff's Department. Currently, we see the proposal using the same words as a win-lose scenario where Irons Court and Irons Way residents, along with HECC members, incur a significant financial burden while receiving no additional services or benefits to our community. In summary, higher property taxes without the corresponding benefits of lower utility and maintenance cost present a significant financial burden. So to kind of come around to a solution, to find a mutually beneficial solution and prevent the need to respond to the threat of legal action, we would ask the City Council to hold off on annexation and establish a time for an open discussion of options and alternatives that create a win-win solution for all parties involved: residents, the country club, developers, and the city.
Thank you, Ron.
Chris Gardner, Bella Homes. I'm the developer for the development, and appreciate you guys' time tonight and bringing up the history. I concur with what was brought up by Tim and everybody. Really no conjecture there, except for the notification part. I did talk to homeowners about this, and it is in the legal documents. It's in their deeds. It's in their title work. So not to sound defensive, but we do have selective memory, and a lot of houses have turned over and have a lot of the original homeowners are not necessarily always there too. And so I just wanted to make that clear, part of your concern. But yeah, thanks. I would say the memory that I have is one thing that's very different is, again, I was a younger man than I am now and working with council I had then. And Larry Curtis did a phenomenal job, and I can't say enough good things about Larry, and I'm very thankful for him and what he did. And we, as a group, always understood that this would happen someday when the sewer and water was going to be available, or when the sewer is going to be available, not just because the land is getting annexed next door. So I think it's very clear about dry sewers at the time. We chose not to do them because we didn't know what the sewer system was going to look like at Borgmar. We didn't know what the street lights were going to look like. We didn't know the elevations were going to be. I mean, we could have did the sewer too low and had to do a lift station or something. We just didn't know. And so it just didn't make sense at that time. And honestly, right now, we still don't know that. We don't know the final layouts. Mr. Dykeman knows that we don't know the exact timing. We don't know the phasing. There's a lot of things that are just unknown. And with Dankbar, with Borgmar, Rose Prairie, land to the east, that's hundreds of acres of land that City of Ames current housing rate and current permit process is going to take many, many years to do that. And so I think the homeowners have a very reasonable request to just wait until that time, and which is what my understanding was. And granted, not trying to say this is a gotcha moment, but I thought it was very clear that it wasn't just when the city had some land next door, it was when the sewer was available. Sewer is not available, so it just doesn't seem any reason to annex at this time. That was my understanding, and again, I'm not an attorney, so I do feel like there is a little bit of a gotcha moment, because I always understood that, and that's what I told every one of my homeowners every time we talked about it, is that when sewer is available, it could be a long time from now, and it still could be a long time from now. So I feel like I am not of integrity, because I've been saying the wrong thing, because based on what my knowledge is, and granted, I'm not an attorney, and so maybe I made a mistake by misunderstanding or what was presented to me from what I thought you guys and my attorneys at the time and everything. So I just want to make that clear. So.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Okay, council.
So alternative 2, there is a splitting off of the properties. What would be any additional options that we could consider for the Irons and Ames Golf and Country Club in making that split?
So alternative 2 is structured to not really delay doing anything. It just puts the 2 annexations on parallel paths, knowing that we have all the materials we need to move ahead with the blue area. More materials need to be obtained for the green area. And assuming that you had to go to court to obtain a decision that the agreement is valid and that they are compelled to sign, that would take quite a while. So the way that one is written is the city attorney would reach out and say, this is our expectation. And then if there was still no performance, we would have to report back to you in 90 days to see what you would want to do as your next step. I'm not, obviously any time limit you want to put on us is your choice as council. I'm not sure what else you're thinking in terms of options besides time. I think the issue, which you're all very well aware of, is the argument against doing it never goes away. And if no one wants to sign it, you always will have to go to court to compel it. So that's always a challenge with, you could defer it for 2 years, you could defer it for 5 years. It'll be the same conversations at that point in time. And I don't know how to create a more effective mechanism to make it automatic if you were to defer it. That's my only, if I had a way to offer that to you, I don't know what that is tonight, to say, fine, wait 5 years and then it's automatic. I don't know how to do that at this point. Other than obtaining signatures and sitting on them. And at some point, those would start to become questionable too. So they would become stale at some point and not useful. So I don't know what else to give you as great guidance there.
If we move forward with alternative 2, do we need to wait to get a formal opinion from Mark before we would proceed? Not that I don't trust what you said tonight, but
I think you could do that. You
Yeah.
could delay by 2 weeks to get an opinion from the attorney in writing about what his opinion is from what you heard tonight. That's not a problem. We could do that.
And the fire chief.
If you have any other questions about anything that was in the letter from the country club, yeah, we as staff can respond to that for you.
I have a follow-up question either for you or for Mark with respect to the agreements. I want to stay in the four corners of the agreement just for a minute. Chris brings up an interesting point that this agreement could have been structured that it was the delivery of city septic to the property that would be the trigger. And I've looked through this and I don't see that as a trigger.
I agree.
And so
we did not write it that way, and it just was never written that way. It was left with complete discretion of the council. The template for this is the dozens of other covenants that you have accepted for other properties around the city. This is just the closest development to the city. Bella Homes down the road has a similar covenant as well. It's always been at the discretion of the council when we've agreed to those covenants.
Okay. And I want to clarify too, if my communication about what was communicated to the homeowners was a question about Chris's integrity in communicating that, I apologize. That was not at all what I intended to communicate. I just don't know what was communicated. You have built phenomenally beautiful homes there, and they're a wonderful addition to the community. But I just want to clarify, I don't know what was said in that, and that's created sort of a challenging situation for us as we try to navigate this agreement.
I'll add to your question, Tim, that the infrastructure installation agreement states that as reasonably practical after annexation, the city agrees to provide public water and sanitary sewer service.
Okay.
That was with the subdivision, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the original 14 agreement would have been very basic because there was no project yet. And then that was followed up with the infrastructure installation agreement that Amelia was just referencing. That again gave council the discretion.
Kelly, who puts in the stormwater on the sanitary sewer main? Is that something the city puts in, or is that private? Yeah, there's septic systems there now.
Per this agreement, the owners of the property have to finance and construct the facility to city standards. So there's two ways that could be done. They could approach you as a group and ask for it to become a special assessment project. So if every homeowner agrees to an assessment to have the city construct and finance it, and then they pay over an established period of time. You've done that one time in the last 15 years down south. I don't remember the name of the street. There was an older rural subdivision that did not have water and sewer, and they approached the city and said, hey, will you do this? And then a special assessment. So that's one option. The owners may find it more viable or cheaper for them to just do it on their own. So they could approach you, you could agree to that, relieve the administrative burden from them, or they could do it themselves.
So we're hearing that certainly going to be paying more property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the larger cost impact is going to be the sanitary sewer, correct?
Well, I think there's trade-offs in all of these things, right? So you have, as you said, they immediately invested in septic that has not run out of its life, right? So at some point you have to replace the septic system. That is not cheap, right? So there's at some point there's a cost that you have to do to maintain. You have an annual maintenance cost. You do not have an annual maintenance cost with city sewer systems. So there's some costs that go away, but there's a large capital cost to make those operating costs go down. Same with water. Your water bill will go down when you're in the city and not on Xenia. But you have to, again, incur a little bit of a cost to do that water switch. So there's some things that go down, but they're all utilities, which are unrelated to property taxes, right? So you have a sewer utility charge and you have a water utility charge that are unrelated to your property taxes.
So does council have the option, let's just say it takes 3 to 5 years for the sewer to get up to that northwest corner, to have some kind of agreement that the main does not need to go in until the first septic system shows sign of failing, and then that basically says the main's got to go in, but then people could also opt to not connect until their sewer or their septic system fails. And I think it'd be cheaper to do it all in one fell swoop. All the excavations there, go ahead and
you're going to have to build the sewer line at one time. If
Right.
you were to structure the services and the replacement of the septics on an as-needed basis, you could do that.
because you mentioned that basically the county would not issue a
So
permit.
per state law, if your home is within 200 feet of a sanitary sewer line, you must connect. So the county, when you need new permits for septic systems, should not be issuing those if there's a sanitary sewer line in the street in front of your house, which is what would be essentially the situation.
But if that main is not installed, they're not bound to do that.
Then they're not bound to do that.
In option 3, you presented us the choice or a choice about transitioning a tax abatement schedule
Mhm.
here. And so that also we could consider with the other options too. So like with option 2, that also.
Right. In this case, we were offering as an incentive to move the project forward to get it to stay on track with the original direction. But yes, the transition of the imposition of taxes just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, you can combine that with any of the alternatives.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Rachel, what do you think?
I'm interested in separating the two, moving ahead with that part A of alternative 2, but would also be interested in getting an opinion from Mark and bringing back that second piece B in 2 weeks when we know more.
Okay. Nina, anything else?
I would agree. I just wondered if, Kelly, you could also speak about why what happens there with sewer systems is important to what happens at Ada Hayden.
Yeah, I think if we would probably, as the city, have not allowed for individual septics if we did not expect connection to a sanitary sewer system. We would have probably required something closer to what Squaw Valley has to the west of here, which would be some kind of a consolidated packet system, something that's serving everybody, and you're not having 32 individual systems. So that was a give on our part not to have central sewer or central septic system services equivalent to sewer at that point in time. So it's important to us. It's a healthier environment to be on a sewer system. There's much less risk from environmental hazards about a common sewer system operated by a municipality. I think that's reinforced by state law, which says if you're by one, you need to connect to it. So I think it's the approach of the state that is a better system in the long run to serve people.
Thank you.
All right, I entertain a motion.
I will move alternative 2, A, with, I don't know if you want these in one motion. I'm going to make a separate.
Let's go ahead and do
You wanna do
2A, and then
2A?
you can go ahead and second. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'll move alternative 2A then.
Second.
All right, discussion?
Wait, tell them what it is.
Yeah, why don't you?
Oh, to split the Borgmeyer related territory annexation from the Irons and the Ames Golf and Country Club and proceed in parallel to initiate an 80-20 annexation of the 238 acres along GW and Hyde related to the Borgmeyer application.
Thank you. All right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, you got that one.
And then I would move that we ask the city attorney to put together a formal memo responding to the letter that we received from the Ames Golf and Country Club to be discussed in 2 weeks.
With the fire chief now.
And we had the fire chief too.
Oh, yes, and the fire chief as
Okay.
well.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Are there any
Just-
other motions?
Can I just be clear then? So the intent of that information is on the 25th, you will then give direction on whether to proceed or how to proceed with
Correct.
the Irons in the Country Club.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
If I could add, so annexation is a fascinating thing that we do on council, and it's very common for us to work with people who would say that they bought the property to be in the country. They don't want to be a part of Ames. And so this is a common response. They don't see that there is a benefit for that. And so I am sympathetic with that up to a point. If you buy close to a city that's growing, there may well be a time when the city seeks to annex. So I don't want to communicate that we are unsympathetic with these concerns. I hope that the people who came tonight, and thank you for everyone for coming, and those of you who have written, I hope that you've seen that I think this council has some opportunities for some flexibility on the septic. And so I don't think the sky is falling. And it may be that it's a very long time before you would be asked to tie into the city's sewer. But I would just ask you to consider, those of you who knew Larry, to just ask yourself this question: could Larry have possibly imagined that we would be here tonight? We negotiated in good faith. We tried to be accommodating to the country club, and it's odd to me that we are where we are tonight. So I'll leave it for your consideration on that.
Right. Ooh, on number 34, JT Warehouse subdivision on East 13th Street, agreement changes. Kelly?
Yeah, so on the dais, I placed a memo about this item. So the draft agreement you received on Friday was slightly modified with 2 additional whereas clauses added. The performance date has not changed. So staff is accepting of the language changes. However, we do have a condition of approval that we want added. So I proposed a new alternative 1. The legal review of the bond that we have on file is still underway, pending the approval of the agreement. So recommending approval of the agreement, subject to the city attorney's office accepting either the current bond or a substitute bond based on an agreement that you approve. And then the second B item, which is a release from a development agreement, that stays the same as what was discussed in the council action form. So in relation to the release from the development agreement, that issue is detailed in the staff report. The original regional mall development included this land plus the commercial land to the west of here. Staff believes, because of actions of the council to rezone the site to industrial over the past 17 years, that by the terms of the agreement, it is not meant to apply to this property. And the developer is asking for that clarification from you, that you do not believe that this industrial zoned property is still subject to that development agreement. So staff is recommending approval of both 1A and 1B as modified in that memo.
That's in front of council right now.
And I have received the signatures of all 3 parties to that agreement. We have received that.
Okay. Questions? Gloria, you have any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, you probably don't.
I do not have the document, and so I guess my question is, am I allowed to abstain from a vote on this since I don't know what the changes are that have been made?
I think that'd be reasonable, Gloria. Yes, thank you. Questions from the dais? All right, open up public input. Is anyone that wants to address council on item number 34? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Is there a motion?
Move alternative 1A and B.
Second.
Okay, I'm just going to read it so everyone who may be watching or listening it says amendment to the public improvements agreement to extend it to September 27th, 2026 per the attached document, contingent upon acceptance of the current financial security or updated financial security to the satisfaction of the city attorney as it relates to the amended agreement. And item B is acknowledgement of release of site from development and contract rezoning agreement. All right, roll call.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Roland.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Abstain due to lack of information.
All right. Very good. We'll move on to item number 35, request for zoning ordinance changes to standards related to property zone residential high density within West University impacted overlay at Oakland Street and Highland Avenue.
Good evening. So this is a staff report in response to a referral from council. So a request from the property owner is for council to look at amending the zoning ordinance to facilitate redevelopment of this property. So we identified there is some policy support for this in the Ames Plan 2040. There's a designation acknowledging it's a higher density area. It's a very walkable area. The zoning is intended to be a mix of some commercial, which exists on West Street, and then it's high density in this area as well. So the developer, though, is asking for a higher density of development than we currently permit within our residential high density zoning. And to achieve that higher density, not only do we need higher density, but they also need a parking reduction. So we don't have either of those options currently within the zoning ordinance. We discuss in the staff report because of the comp plan designation as a walkable area and its adjacency to campus, there is some policy support to think about lowering parking requirements and possibly adding density. So if council thinks those are possibly good things to do, we outlined 4 options of whether you want to undertake that and how you would want to approach that. So there are some questions of how the process should start, how many properties should be involved. So option 1 would look at this request through the lens of more of a neighborhood plan. So I'm going to pull up the land use map here for a second. So this area in orange is the designation that is the same as this property called RN4. So if you were to take option 1, we would look at this as more of a neighborhood plan related to that RN4 designation and come up with what we think more than just one property would likely benefit from or be appropriately changed and from a zoning perspective. So that would involve some outreach, some discussion, formulating new plans and ideas, reviewing them with the council, possibly having additional public neighborhood outreach. It's a longer process. It's much like the redirection area discussions we had last summer about how that would be done, but this was not labeled as a priority for us to do that, so it was not on your list of things to do. If you think that the idea has merit and are concerned that it might take longer than the developer has requested, they had requested hoping for resolution by this summer to pursue a project later this fall. There is a way to do that. It involves less outreach. It is not a neighborhood plan. It is to develop new standards and create a new type of a new type of zoning overlay that could be applied over time to additional properties, but it would not be done at one time. Versus option 1, you would establish it for all the properties at one time and have kind of a uniform approach. Then in option 3 and 4, they're looking at this a little bit differently. Does this really fit as a priority for council at this time? So you have the option that we probably would have looked at this as part of the zoning ordinance update. Again, this was not highlighted as a priority in the comp plan, but we knew it's one of the many things that needed to be adjusted as we work through a zoning ordinance update. So if you took no action on this request, it would in some way get addressed as part of the overall zoning ordinance update, which I would say is an 18 to 24 month process till it's completed. And then the 4th option would be to not take action tonight, defer it till the next time you look at the work plan and decide what your priorities are for what you want to do the rest of this year and during next year. And the main issue there is we're going to have a workshop in April to discuss the scope of the zoning ordinance update. So when you adopted the work plan last year in May of 24, you filled our calendar for the first 12 months. So essentially close to where we are now. And then we did not load the back half of 2025 with items because the idea was that we would begin the zoning ordinance update. And that would be a very time-consuming project. But we have not yet had that workshop. So I do not have a scope of work and a timing plan for that. So if you picked option 4, the idea there is you would have completed the workshop. We would have some idea of what the plan is to move forward. And then you would decide where to put this request along with the other dozens of things that are on the work plan that have yet to be prioritized. So with that explanation, I think we can answer questions about the RN4 designation, the request of the developer in terms of what the development issues are, and obviously talk about the options and what the timing issues are with each.
Questions?
Kelly, could you bring the first map back to show the subject property? I am probably most interested in option 2. But I do think we need to at least have the conversation about the cars. So over the last 5 years, we've seen a reduction in our expectations for parking. Things have been more relaxed, and I don't know that the sky has fallen. I think that strategy of reducing the parking requirements has proven to be good. It's allowed us to increase the density of the developments. And so there have been a lot of win-wins. And I don't know that I've received any feedback saying that we're off track on this. So I am generally wanting to continue the momentum of what we're doing. But I do think it's interesting with this neighborhood, people aren't going to be parking on Oakland, right?
That's the only place they could park on a street. There's a limited number of spaces.
Yeah,
on
there's
Oakland.
just very little parking.
Very
there.
little.
And Highland, there's no parking.
No parking on Highland.
And so, just take us a little bit. I'm always worried about the law of unintended consequences. So, from your perspective, what's the worst that we could be seeing if there was overflow parking? Where would it go?
Yeah, I think it goes on to Campus Avenue, obviously, and then it does start to stretch for this particular property. The only other option is west down Oakland Street because there are no other public streets with parking on them. I'm not sure that overnight parking is allowed on Sheldon in that area. Theoretically, there's the possibility if there's students to park remotely at the stadium. But as we mentioned in the report, that's not a given. There's a priority to that process in terms of on-campus residents have the right to those spaces, and they may be opened up to off-site students or off-campus students in an order of that hierarchy. So I don't know if we started this process with no request, if I would have said, absolutely, we're going to go to one space per unit, I don't know that I would have gotten there necessarily. And I'm not sure I'm there yet either. It's worth discussing. Like I think what you're saying, it's worth discussing. And if you look at it as a neighborhood plan, you probably look at a little bit more about what the development potential is and a little bit more about maybe what the parking on site can be and maybe some projection of what overflow might entail. And then you work through those issues. That's kind of how we're going to approach the redirection areas.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Well, I just have a comment. For the property in question right now, there already is a bunch of overflow parking that's on Campus Avenue. There's, the parking lot is always full, pretty much every minute of every day. And then you can't really park on Oakland overnight. You'll have to move your car by like 6 a.m. And who's doing that? Really. So you have to, most of the people that live in that property will park on Campus Avenue if they can't find a spot in the parking lot, which then means maybe they'll have to set an alarm on their phone for 9 p.m. every night to make sure that they move it to the other side, even if they're not in their car driving every day. And I think students do bring their cars, and granted, there's a bus stop right there for green, and then the red stop is about a block south of there. But the parking, it's important to have a good number of parking spots because some of these students that live off campus, they're still bringing their cars so that their parents don't have to come get them to pick them up for breaks. And they might not live that far away, so they can drive home for breaks and whatnot. And so moving their car every day at 9 p.m. is kind of a hassle. And then, you've got the intermodal facility, which is about a 15-minute walk from there, or you've got the stadium parking, and then there's not really a great route, a bus route from intermodal back down here. And so in the blistering cold winters, it's kind of a rough situation there. And then with the stadium parking, you've got blue, and the closest that'll get you is, maybe puts you right out by the engineering buildings right there, and then you still have 2 blocks to walk also.
You may need to hire her. That was amazing. Thank you.
I live there.
I was going to say, she might have some inside information here.
Personal insight there.
That was just
Might have
simply
great
amazing.
familiarity with this block.
Familiar with the area right now.
No, those are great. It's great points for sure. And I think the balance here is density, which is really what we want to. I think our goal is to add that. But I think you make some good points. But it's all a balance in terms of wanting to create more housing units in the city in general. It keeps pressures down on rent and things like that. The more units we can add. So I think. But I appreciate you bringing up those points for sure.
It's a great insight in the day in the life of someone that is around campus and what parking is like, both public access and then private access and then the transit system.
Yeah.
Great synopsis, I think, of what many people's experiences are.
I will say.
So, Mayor, it sounds to me like if I heard correctly, what Emily is saying is that the current overlay really is not accommodating all the parking that's needed as it is, which is the 1.25. That overlay, I believe, was put in place in 2005 to protect the neighborhood. And I suspect in the last 20 years, many of the single family homes in that neighborhood have now become multi unit properties, multi-bedroom student rental, as opposed to single family, but I don't have the map in front of me to confirm that. So while I don't disagree that we need to reconsider this overlay, both in terms of is it doing what it's supposed to do? Do we need it? And also, is it accommodating this particular development or not? I'm not sure whether I want this request driving that discussion or not. I'm willing to be convinced that this is a good pilot project for us to test things, but it's difficult to know when I hear what Emily's saying, whether that is actually going to bear out the theory that we should cut down our parking maximums.
I would argue, I mean, you know how I feel about parking, right? But I would argue that the environmental factors will also guide behavior, right? So it takes time for that to happen. Admittedly, it's not like in the first month after the parking goes away, but over time, I think that's why in urban areas, people are increasingly choosing not to have cars, is because over time densification happens. It gets harder to park. And that is a natural process that I think Ames is going through and has to go through in order to densify. So I know it creates a short-term pinch while that is being absorbed by people who live in that environment, but that would be my stump for going forward with it anyway.
Other questions or comments?
Just echo Emily's. Campus Ave is the first street to the west of campus that has on-street parking available. And so oftentimes it's not even people who live in the neighborhood that are parking there, but students who live even farther off campus, finding the first place they can park closest to campus there. So I have noticed that those streets are often very, very full of cars. I do agree with what Bronwyn said, though, about density is, a trade-off with this, though. And I think students would welcome a higher amount of units that are that close to campus when it is a great location that you don't necessarily need a car at, because you can walk to campus and you're on 2 major subway routes.
All right, we'll open up public comment. Does anyone want to address council on this topic tonight? Hi, Justin.
Good evening, Council. Justin Dodge, Hunsaker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Just a couple of thoughts listening to the presentation. So this is one of the oldest properties in Hunsaker's portfolio. So clearly built before the 1.25 per bedroom. I don't know the exact bedroom count, but I would assume it's 2s and 3s, if not 4s. That was probably more common back in the 60s and 70s. And so 15 units, so 16 counting the house. So probably have more parking, but obviously not per the bedroom. So in the new plan that we're looking at, just some concepts, we're only looking at concepts, but we've got 2 levels of parking, so 56 stalls already. So 1 per unit is what we've been planning. So it's a new one for us as well, but we certainly welcome the challenge of working on this project. So, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment.
I'll move alternative 2.
Which is,
So can I make one other comment? If alternative to, I think in the report, we said it could begin as early as March. I did not update that when we wrote the memo. I want to point out that with other things that are going on with the Borgmeyer annexation, the Romero House process is not yet concluded. There's some other things that are going on. I don't know that the applicant can apply, but I don't know that I can guarantee that this process will get kicked off immediately here in the next 2 weeks and meet that timeline that's described. So it's the best option available to the developer, but I can't guarantee that timeline that we first brought up back when the memo was first written.
so you moved alternative 2, increasing the density.
So I'm curious if the developer would, if that changes the developer's recommendation between 1 and 2, if we don't have certainty with respect to the timing of it.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about the timing of the project.
All right, so did you move, there wasn't a second. So
Oh,
you
second.
Okay, move second, okay.
If Justin, could you come back just for a second? I just want to make sure, since this is a change, there's a change in time frame. If I want to take Kelly to his word, he's got a lot on the plate, and so if that change in schedule happens, does that change the developer's recommendation between 1 and 2?
No, I think we'd still like to stick with option 2.
Okay, I just wanted to hear that. Okay.
What is the timing though, if it's not March?
I just don't know. Like, right. So option 2 just basically plops it down in front of our office. And usually we try to tackle that as quick as possible. I just know that within the next 3 weeks, I'm not taking on anything new. There's too many things that are yet to be resolved. We would then move, it would be an application for a text amendment. We generally move through that as staff, trying to work through options. I'll probably have to come back to you on you endorsing some element of a text amendment, and then we go through P&Z and council, and then they apply to rezone the property in the future.
It's still the quickest alternative.
It's the shortest one. I'm just not going to be able to guarantee that it's going to start in 10 days.
Okay.
So normally we don't ask, we don't have this back and forth, but I think we're just trying to get down to how can we try and accomplish multiple goals. When are you thinking or wanting to break ground?
And for us, this is a 2026 project. So not jumping on it right away is okay. We just want to know the policy and if the policies match up so that way we can start in and continue on with concepts and making sure everything works.
Breaking ground in 2026? Is that what? Okay, thank you.
So that's helpful because I think
I thought
we thought you were trying to get breaking ground.
Yeah, originally it was just at a kickoff meeting, it was described as this summer. So that's quite a bit different to say it's a break ground in 26.
The CAF just indicated, August 25. We're thinking, how in the world are you going to do that and try and have all this done? So that's helpful. So you're comfortable with option 2. And it's not, you don't get everything you want, Justin, just so you're aware of that. So, but anyway, trying to accomplish both objectives, increasing density. Okay. Thank you.
So, sorry, just the email we received says the project is supposed to be complete by the start of the 2026 school year. Is that not what you're saying?
I'm not sure what the email said, but I'm looking at our construction schedule and where all the other projects that we have in front of this and where things fall in.
Okay. Because, yeah, it says the intent is to start this fall and complete by the start of the 2026 school year.
Yeah.
It's from Chuck.
Yeah.
And it's in.
So,
And what, so you have people living in units now. And so will they have through the lease? How does that work?
Or people that renewed already too. Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot speak to that aspect since I have not talked with anyone in property management to figure out what the details are.
Okay. All right. We're getting into the weeds here. All right. So you answered our question. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So
All right,
then,
this motion was made for option 2, alternative 2, and it was seconded. Go ahead.
so I was going to ask then, given that new timeline, is there a reason we couldn't consider 3, which then would help us get this project into some existing actions that you were planning to take?
3 would not be resolved by next year. So
Okay.
3 is to throw it into the zoning ordinance update.
Okay.
That one I can confidently say will not be done by
Okay.
this year.
Thank you.
That's a 12 to 18-month process, you said.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
But one you said it maybe would be done this
So-
year. just longer
So if
than-
so one would take longer than two, but it's for the whole area. Essentially, if you're doing this, you're just saying this is the next thing to do without considering anything else on the work plan. So that would be the process. It's much more involved. It's essentially a redirection area level process. So that's something that we would kick off, sometime later this spring, I guess, to start it off. Hopefully have resolution on options and what you would like to do by the fall, so you can adopt new standards if that's what you choose to do.
If we did this, would it push back like zoning ordinance or?
I hope not. So I think in April, I'm hopefully gonna get two things from you in April on any priorities you have besides what I'm going to say is necessary to address. And then your expectation is council on what the engagement process for the zoning ordinance is. So if that's what I need to know to then set up a schedule for what we will be doing with the staff that we have. We have 4 out of 5 staff members right now. We have a vacancy we've had for a while. We're working through that. We'll hopefully to have someone hired here by summer. But that's also part of the workload factor at this point in time.
Kelly, is it true? We haven't built anything like this, it seems like, for a while. Am I correct on this?
Multifamily?
Yeah, like this?
I mean, the Campus Town project are all at a much larger scale. This is a much smaller scale in terms of it being 3 floors of living over parking instead of the 5 or 6 floors of living. But
It just seems like it's been a while since we've done a project like this, and I'm super excited to see this. And hopefully this will be catalytic for other properties. So I'm looking at this not just as the property at hand, but hopefully there'll be some others that come along.
yeah, I think that's the whole point is that
Yeah.
the comp plan says this is a different district. What is its evolution beyond what it is today? Is it this? That's yet to be determined, but it may be this.
Great, thank you.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, I hate to keep going back to this. Just out of curiosity, though, if the intent is what Chuck says in his email to open by fall of 2026, if we vote in favor of option 2,
I can't guarantee
If
that
that-
you will have the property rezoned in that time frame by August for him to start a project. I would assume it's at least a 12 to 16 month build once it's approved.
Okay. Because the letter that's in the council packet also clearly identifies.
quite specific. So
Yeah.
It says the building will be completed August of 26. Our goal is to start the project August of 25. So we're just trying to make sure that we understand.
I think it's an extremely tight timeline to say April, May, June, July. You have decided what your new standards are, adopted them, rezone the property, and approve a site plan and for a new building. That's aggressive.
To make that work, we'd need to come back with options in early April for you all to consider for the zoning text amendment.
All right. So we had someone from Hunziker state that it's a year delay. So the motions are made and second. Is there any further questions or comments?
I'll just comment that I prefer option 1, so I'll be voting no on option 2. I think because we can't guarantee getting it done by August, I would rather take the time to do a complete look at this neighborhood. I think it could potentially be in line, not combined, but in line with some of Gloria's concerns about if our parking overlay is really working there too, or what would be ways for us to address that in these areas. And then I think this would be more standard for more projects in the future rather than just having an overlay that could be on specific sites. It would be for the neighborhood in general. So.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion carried 4-2. All right. We'll move on to item number 36. Ames Main Street, 515 days, May 15th and 16th. Ryan?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here to discuss 515 days for Ames Main Street. There are a variety of components to this that are being requested for approval tonight. But the reason why we're talking about this outside of the consent agenda, which we would normally have an event like this on, has to do with one specific request related to the alcohol consumption for the event. So historically, for special events, with a very small handful of exceptions, we have practiced that there needs to be a designated beer garden area or alcohol consumption area, and we treat that like any other premises that's licensed for alcohol consumption, which means that if a majority of the sales relate to alcohol consumption, then individuals under the age of 21 aren't permitted into that premises. For this event, Ames Main Street is requesting that the patrons of the event be allowed to take alcohol throughout the event space rather than being in a designated area. And after some discussion with staff, we've come up with what we believe are some reasonable justifications to test this new model out, and we believe that it has is likely to be a successful event. So I just want to bring your attention to the specific circumstances related to the event that we believe justify a suspension of Section 17.16 of Municipal Code related to minors on premises. That's in the second page of your council action form. And we've listed out for you a variety of the reasons. And I won't go through all of them, but key among them are the nature of the event being a daytime event. It concludes before sundown occurs. It is an event where entertainment is the focus, the main focus, and alcohol is incidental to the entertainment and the food. It's marketed as a family-friendly event. And it's organized by an entity that we have some experience with, Ames Main Street, and which has an investment in doing this correctly and ensuring that they're permitted to do future events of this nature. So with those things in mind and the others that we've laid out for you, we feel comfortable proceeding in this instance, recommending that you suspend enforcement of that particular section of the code. I believe that Travis from Ames Main Street is here. If you have any questions, I'm sure he can answer any of the specific event-related ones. And I'm happy to answer any questions from a staff perspective.
Thanks, Brian. Questions for Brian? Gloria, do you have any questions?
I guess maybe it's more a question for Travis if he's willing to.
Yeah, we'll have him come
up.
We'll have him come here in a minute, but any questions?
Okay.
Any questions for staff?
I don't think so.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll open up public comment. Your people are invited to come up and
Good evening.
And magically, hey, Travis.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Travis Tolliver with the Alliance on Ames Main Street. Just want to thank you for your consideration of this proposed change. Ames Main Street always tries to make every effort to have our events be family friendly for the entire community when it houses in our historic downtown district. And so we feel like this proposed change would bring this event in line with similar type events throughout the region and the state, even the nation. Also, too, I want to point out as well, and I think I mentioned this at the bottom of my email to you last week, that this event exemplifies the use of the festival streets as proposed in the guiding vision document that we presented to you last month. And so just to keep in line with that and be able to use this event in conjunction with that proposed idea in mind, we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to have that happen. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah. Gloria, you had a question?
Yeah, so the weekend of 515 days is graduation weekend at Iowa State. And I'm wondering if you anticipate any challenges because of that celebration going on, either with a change in the size of the crowds or enforcement or any of that from the Main Street perspective?
That's a great question. And, you know, the 15th is a Thursday, the 16th is a Friday. And we certainly took that into account and hoping that we have more attendees come and experience our downtown because of that event. So We do have, we're going to be contracting with extra security, making sure they're checking ideas. We have 2 volunteers at each barricade, all the things that we need to make this a family and friendly and safe event, no matter how many attendees we have.
Thank you.
So I love this project, and it just shows you've got some momentum going, and these kind of events are going to continue to build. I love it. I am curious, have you had any kind of feedback from business owners that might not have access to their properties or parking, those kind of things? Any feedback from them?
So we made a concerted effort to notify businesses both throughout the entire downtown, but also the affected businesses as well. There's about 15 of them. We communicated with them through email and in person with a flyer to notify them of the changes. We did get responses back from a couple of businesses, I think I included in the email to you, that were positive. They felt like this was a good evolution of the next steps for this type of event. And certainly we had some letters of support from the Alliance and Discover Ames as well to support that nature. So
appreciate your leadership in creating a great event.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, my question was more about insurance and that kind of thing. Just thinking that you've probably checked with other cities that have done something similar. Because this is a broader area, are there more liability issues? And also whether or not, I'm sorry that Mardi Gras is in my mind, but spillage of beverages, if that creates any issues that you all have already thought about.
Great question. I'll be out there with a team of volunteers probably cleaning up the spillage, but no, the insurance part of it, it is actually, if you look in comparison to other events similar to this, a very small footprint. But we feel like it's enough space to be able to have families enjoy both the beverage and all the amenities that the event's going to be offering within a very small area. So we're not too concerned about it.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned Festival Street. Can you describe what you mean by that on Douglas?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take a look at the guiding vision plan, you see that both Douglas and Burnett, and even the roadway out in front of Schenker Plaza, are deemed to be what they're being called Festival Streets. So areas that we could block, put pop-up bollards on, so that we can extend event space in downtown and be able to provide very safe spaces on roadways to be able to carry pedestrian traffic and prevent any kind of vehicular traffic, so that we can have a very safe festival type event.
Just to be clear, we're not talking about permanently closing a street. It's basically just a temporary
correct
use, and it would, like you said, it would be blocked on both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One small thing, and I apologize if you covered this, Cyride. Any concerns for Cyride?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to address council? All right, we'll close public comment. Any closing comments or questions? Otherwise, I entertain a motion.
Do we move on all items or?
Well, actually, yeah, there's on the amended agenda, there's items 36A through 36G. I did verify with Mark, we can take those all as one motion. So if, to make it easier on our recording clerk down here, if you want to say items 36A through G, that'd be good.
I would move approval of item 36A through G.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Garten.
Aye.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen. Aye.
Very good. Thanks, Brian. All right, we move on to item 37, discussion on consideration of a micro mobility ordinance. Okay, Paul and Nolan.
So Mayor and City Council, in October, you requested that staff work on drafting a micromobility ordinance. And since then, we've done some research around what are some existing ordinances that are in place and what are some of the rules around this. So you have the staff report that we've provided you in advance. What we really have found is that these types of micromobility ordinances can vary greatly by state. And so our research has focused on other Iowa cities who are subject to the same state laws as we are. So we looked at Ankeny, Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and Iowa City. What we also saw is that the term micromobility can vary greatly, and so it will be important in whatever we put forward to really put some definition around that. The state of Iowa does give us some definitions to use, and so that's typically where cities begin. So actually my clicker's not working. So in the state of Iowa, there are 3 classes of bikes and e-bikes. Those are shown on the screen there. But it's really defined by the maximum speed and then also the power delivery that is there. So you'll see class 1, class 2, class 3. And also bicycles are defined as being equal to or less than 750 watts or 1 horsepower. And there is a state requirement that the minimum age to operate a class 3 is 16. What these classes are, though, is they are specific to bikes and low-speed bike or e-bikes. They are not necessarily applicable to other e-vehicles like e-scooters and that sort of thing. So that's an important piece to remember. Our recommendation, therefore, is to adopt in the updated ordinance the MPO's term for personal transportation device. So some of these terms get a little bit interchanged in conversation, but our recommendation going forward is that we use a personal transportation device, and you'll see that definition up there. So under 150 pounds can be equipped with an electric motor, and then a speed less of 20 miles per hour, but excluding the bikes and low speed bikes. So currently in our municipal code, we have Chapter 4, which addresses bicycles, which includes low-speed bikes. What it doesn't address is the other electric assisted devices. So your e-scooters, e-skateboard, hoverboards, that type of device, those personal transportation devices. And so we're recommending that rather than creating a new chapter to address these personal transportation devices, that we just update the Chapter 4 to include the personal transportation devices. So in an ordinance like this, there's a lot of different components that are taken into consideration, things from, what the device equipments are to the operation regulations and so forth. There's a lot of pieces in there, but for tonight, our goal is to have you focus in on a couple of key questions, which are on there on the screen for you. So where should bicycles and personal transportation devices be allowed or not allowed? Should there be speed limits? If so, where and what would those speed limits be? And should we allow some exceptions to the ordinance? I just want to state, you all know this, but for the public who maybe is less familiar with the council process, tonight we're not making any final decisions on any of this. This is really just getting your guidance on your thoughts on those 3 questions, and then staff will draft ordinance, put it out for public feedback, and then the draft ordinance will come back before you for any type of decision. So I just want to be very clear, we're not making any final decisions tonight, just seeking your guidance on those 3 components. And so if we go back to those 3 questions, the first one is, actually, sorry, you can go forward. Where to allow the use of these devices. So typically what we see is that they are allowed on multi-use paths, sidewalks, and roadways, and that if they're operating on roadways, the motor vehicle laws apply to riding on the roadway. What we typically see in cities is that there are restrictions that are put in place, and most commonly they're in the downtown areas or in very pedestrian-heavy districts. And so cities may sometimes identify those areas right up front in their codes, or they might allow administrative staff to identify where those areas are. And then there are different preferences on where people should be riding when there's a roadway, a sidewalk, and a multi-use trail present in one area. So in chapter 4, we already have some restricted areas for bicycles, which include no riding on the sidewalks in the downtown area and the campus area, and then no roadway use on Grand Avenue. In our code, we also have a section that prohibits bike riding in certain parks in our system. And so really the first question for you is, are there additional areas to restrict riding? So Mayor, I don't know if we want to approach these one at a time, maybe, or if you want me to roll through the other two questions.
Let's roll through all of them.
Okay.
And maybe it becomes integrated.
Okay.
And then we can come back to this slide, and that would be helpful. And then also we're going to take public comment too. So we'll
Okay.
just take public comment at one time. We're not going to do
Okay. Yep.
open all three of them. I mean, individually. So why don't you go ahead?
So the second set of questions is, should there be speed limits, and if so, where? So by default, Iowa State Code already sets a 20 miles per hour default speed limit on e-bikes. And then in our current bicycle code, we have language that says reasonable and prudent speed. You see that type of similar language in other cities as well. You see that in the Des Moines Code, and you see that in the Iowa City Code. And then Ankeny, there's a different set of other rules put into place. You see the careful and prudent speed, and then you have additional restrictions. So no class 3 low speed electric bikes allowed on sidewalks. So those are the ones that can go up to 28 miles per hour. And then signage establishing where reduced speed limits are. They have signage where there are some restrictions in place. And then it also restricts going faster than 25 miles per hour when riding on the roadway or street unless there is a bike lane present.
What does that one mean? Like what? I mean, okay, so if I'm on a bicycle, I saw that and I was like, what does that mean? I can't go faster than 25 miles an hour on the road unless there's a bike lane there, and then I can on the road?
Yeah, I believe it's a safety piece that they did. Yes.
I don't quite understand that. Just the reason, or
Yeah, I don't recall the.
In your research, do you know, are these fairly recent ordinances, or do you have a sense of that? I'm just curious because some of these devices have come up relatively recently.
Yeah.
Curious if those ordinances have been updated to reflect those.
I can't remember the dates. Do you remember the dates?
Ankeny's is the most recent one for sure. And then Iowa City and Des Moines had updated theirs recently as well. But there was variation in that too.
Yeah.
And then one more question on this, because I want to keep going through the rest of them. These communities vary a lot in terms of their bike trail infrastructure. So Cedar Falls, for example, has an outstanding bike trail infrastructure. And I'm curious, do they treat these rules uniformly throughout their system, or do they recognize that some areas are going to have a higher level of pedestrian traffic and should be treated differently than other areas? They have some wide open areas of bike trails. I've had the opportunity to bike over there. Beautiful. So are they treated differently in some areas?
So I think what you do see is those restrictions in pedestrian heavy areas. So a lot of downtown areas will have, I think in all of them, there's some restrictions on the downtown area because of it being pedestrian heavy.
So we have some flexibility. We don't have to have a
Correct.
one-size-fits-all approach
Correct.
to all of our infrastructure.
Yep.
Thanks.
Another best practice is, depending on the width of the path, if there's room to pass pedestrians safely, then you're allowing more use on those wider paths than on the more narrow paths.
So we did take a look at some non-Iowa city speed limits too, just to see what's happening across the country. I think we picked up kind of 3. Central Park, New York, they do have a 20 miles per hour speed limit in their area. But again, the infrastructure is the key piece there. They have a large path where there's a pedestrian section and then there's a bike path. So the 20 miles per hour speed limit makes sense because you have a clear bike area for on the multi-use path. The Golden Gate Bridge, bicycles and e-bikes are allowed. On the bridges, sidewalk must observe 15 miles per hour. You can really find them all over the place. And then in Minneapolis, 20 miles per hour unless posted otherwise. So they do vary vary quite a bit. And I think that that is an important piece to keep in mind, is that there's not like a standard practice that works really well across the entire nation. So we outlined some possible options around this area, this question about speed limits, if so, where and what. So, those are out for you there, but we could keep the existing reasonable and prudent language, but set some not to exceed speed areas in the areas identified by staff, or you could keep that reasonable and prudent language, but set a not to exceed speed of 10 miles per hour on multi-use paths and parks. You could just keep the language as it is right now. You could set a not to exceed speed across the city at X miles per hour, whatever you think is appropriate, or you could set a not to exceed speed based on the type of facility being used. So a street versus a multi-use path versus a sidewalk. I will say I did not see any examples where that's kind of true across the boards. That one's a little different. And then the last question for you is just around exceptions. Do we allow some exceptions in our ordinance? It looks like a lot of cities do include some exceptions for parades, and that's regulated through the permit process, and then ADA mobility devices too. And then the staff recommendation is that yes, we should allow for these exceptions, but with the caveat that the mobility device should not be equipped to carry another person. And that there be some sort of process put in place to identify the exception processes. So those are the three main questions we're asking you to give us some guidance on tonight. Again, staff will take your input, put together a draft, put it out for public comments, and then come back to you at a later date.
You want to go back
Jump in
to
one more question? Maybe this is actually the elephant in the room, is on the issue of enforcement. So have you had a chance to visit with our police chief about what enforcement looks like for these different options?
Yeah, I think enforcing speed limits is going to be really challenging. I think we saw that in our research across different cities as well. Where we typically see enforcement happen is if there's a micromobility operator in town, so someone who's running an e-scooter share business or a biking share business, where you put some regulations in place where you require that operator to monitor their device or put some settings into their devices that limit the speed that it can go. That's typically where you see the enforcement piece happen. A lot of it is going to be around public education and awareness as well, and just making people aware of what speed limits are and having people hold each other accountable to that to some degree. But, as far as enforcement go, that's going to be a real challenge. I think our police is already down staff. And so this is, they've got plenty of other higher priority items to be enforcing. So that is a challenge.
Well, as we think through this, it's one thing to adopt an ordinance, but if we're not willing to enforce it or we don't have the capacity to enforce it, it really becomes more of a paper tiger. We say these are community standards, but we really don't have a mechanism for enforcing it. So I just want to throw that out as a point of tension to think through. It doesn't mean we don't do it, but I just think it needs to be a topic of conversation.
So are you back to the first question that we were on to get some feedback on? And
Are we going to take public input before council talks on this topic?
well, I thought if we just go through and just get some council, comments and questions, and then we'll go ahead and get the public feedback.
Okay.
If there's no questions, we'll just go right into public input then.
Sure.
So, Paul,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
well, I was just going to ask, in your research findings, Cedar Rapids actually, if the speed limit is greater than 35, then micro-mobility vehicles cannot be there. I would think that we would want to consider something like that as well. That's it. Go ahead.
So Damien is not here tonight. Has Damien had a chance to weigh in on some of this material?
He has, yes. He's been part of the team that has been working on prepping for this. Yep.
And any input from him that you think would be important for us to consider?
I think that so by default, if you remember, the Iowa State Code already limits it to 20 miles per hour. He thinks that works for what we have. I think his concern is more about safety. If it becomes an issue where you're on a shared use path and safety becomes an issue, and that's a pronounced issue in the community, then at that point we would maybe consider something slower. But
he has a good handle on best practices as well. My cards on the table, we've been investing $1 million to $1.5 million per year, which I think is a very laudable and aggressive investment in our multi-use trail infrastructure. That's one of the reasons I ran for council, was to see that development and also create greater connectivity between these different trail systems. My parade of horribles is that we wake up and a large portion of our community no longer feels like they feel safe going out to Ada Hayden. They feel safe going to Brookside Park, Moore Park, because they're having to dodge the latest device that happens to be flying by them. So there are people that have a high degree of willingness to endure some of that. But I'm telling you, there are a ton of people, there's only so many times they get buzzed and they're like, we're done. I'm tired of taking my kids to this because this isn't worth it anymore. And so this is a huge balancing issue for us. And I don't have a good answer for this because some of these devices are new enough. We don't fully understand how compatible they are with existing uses. But I'm just going to stake out a piece of ground. That's my fear, and I want to protect the infrastructure we put in place.
But you make a decision to handle those areas differently if you want to.
Well,
Those parks.
So I'm really interested, like where, again, common ground, where we can find some flexibility. And there are certainly areas of our infrastructure that have very little pedestrian traffic. So could we be creative? Could we show some flexibility in those spaces? I would be very open in test driving that, no pun intended.
No, why don't you go back to the 3 questions? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up public comment, and here are the questions that council's being asked tonight to give some direction and input on to staff. Is that correct, Pa?
Yes.
So kind of helps people, they can kind of see it. Certainly you can offer other comments regarding the merits of creating a micro mobility ordinance. So if anyone wants to come up and address council tonight, they're welcome to do so. Just introduce yourself, and if you could try and limit your comments to 3 to 4 minutes, that'd be helpful.
Good evening, Jerry Neal, 916 Ridgewood, since apparently the little keypad wasn't working. I have a few comments and observations that I want to make. There's a lot here to cover because there was a lot in the document. So I'll try to organize my comments in a way that makes sense. First, thinking of definitions, that was the first part. 1A. A bicycle can also be four-wheeled. Very simple little note here. And that's included in the model bicycle codes from the Iowa Bike Coalition. I should comment that I'm going to be speaking for myself, so I didn't go to any meeting of ABC people or IBC people or anything else. So this is Jerry as a bike commuter and someone that's just been doing this for a really long time. Okay, so first of all, Iowa Bike Coalition model code, there can be four-wheeled bikes. So making sure we get that in there. So I want to suggest that somewhere in this, and I didn't see it, and it may be somewhere else, that we talked about the possible transgressions that could happen, like people didn't have the right reflectors, they don't have the right headlight, taillights, those sorts of things. We need to at least document that can be taken care of with a fix-it ticket. So that idea is just that if you get a citation, it's a citation that's issued for you, that you weren't up to par on one of these things, but you have, the Bike Coalition would suggest 72 hours to fix it or repair it or do something with it before it becomes a really big deal. So that's a enforcement thing that makes it more palatable for all the different kinds of users. And with respect to just the safety regulations, there's a discussion in there about the right of way. Like, so if you're a pedal assist, you should be yielding to humans. Well, I totally agree with that, but I find it sort of ironic that we're willing to do that for the bikes and the pedal assist bikes, but we're not willing to do it for the automobiles in town with respect to the pedestrians. But I'm being opinionated. There was also a comment on a hands-free ban. I totally fine with that. I think most people are. Again, it's kind of weird that 4 years later, we're still at the State House trying to figure out why we should do hands-free when we're driving a car, but we're willing to go after the people on bikes. So done with opinions. There was a section on council guidance, and the discussion was, where do we allow these electric transportation units to be used or not to be used? And I felt like that a lot of the staff recommendations were pretty strong here. But one thing that stands out to me was that we brought up in the municipal code 19 about the parks. And I think that a further discussion on the parks is really important. I'm an Ada Hayden board member, and with that being a loop trail, we see user conflict. That's an active issue out there that's going on. And I live close to, I'm a neighbor at Brookside Park. And there we have these organic off-trail uses that are in play. Again, we have active issues of use of the parks. And so for me, the parks discussion is kind of its own bailiwick. So I don't want to see it lumped into these other pieces. There was also a request for guidance on speed limits. And the way I think about that is that the primary design of our system here in Ames is kind of reasonably short distance, multi-user paths. And so to me, it makes sense to be thinking about a multi-user path and a sidewalk speed limit, okay? And the suggestion was reasonable and prudent not to exceed, and that seems like that's probably the way that we should think about proceeding. As a user, I would say that. I would also say that to me, a bike lane in a street is a very different ballgame. Brom, when you brought up that point earlier, and I was just kind of laughing because I thought, I had actually written down, if you're out on the street, you need to be moving because you're actually more of a hazard if you're not moving. I thought it was very interesting that you were allowed to move more quickly in the bike lane than you were on the street. So that's a piece to pay attention. But everybody's big hang up here is, what's the speed? Are we going to have a speed? What's the speed going to be? And so, for that, I went to a website that does, it's like a forum for electronic bike reviews and talks and all that sort of thing. And although the discussion that I was kind of looking at is old, because it's like a 2020, there was a general agreement amongst the people in this forum that we shouldn't be paying attention to the class of bike, but thinking about the trail and the speed. And they like the idea of these multi-use trails running 15 miles an hour or 12 to 15 miles an hour. And as someone who knows what 15 miles an hour looks like on a bike of any kind, I find myself in complete agreement with that when I'm thinking about a multiple number of users on these kinds of trails. So for me, if we're thinking about a speed limit, I certainly would encourage considering a max of 15 when we're thinking about these multi-users and the sidewalks. That seems very reasonable. And then regarding enforcement, I agree. It's going to be a really big issue. And I think that the key here, and staff has already brought it up, there's got to be public outreach, but I do think the key is encouragement. Encouragement is the key feature of the outreach. So the goal isn't actually the speed. The goal is that we want safe and respectful interactions among all of our different kinds of users, which will always be changing. So when I think of enforcement, I think that that's probably the priority in how we approach that to get enforcement. And then just a comment that I agree with not licensing the users, but licensing the micro mobility operators. So I think that's covered my points.
Thank you, Jerry.
Questions? Yeah, thank you very much.
Others? Kevin?
Thank you for allowing me to say a few words tonight. Kevin Burke with Discover Ames. I know that the council's been approached by a couple different times over the years on different groups that were looking at renting potential scooters, e-bikes, those type of things. And I'm glad you're looking at this. I think you have your work cut out for you in trying to come up with the answers to Pa's questions. But I just ask that you keep in mind that those opportunities that we've been approached with before are not going away. And we at Discover Ames are encouraging those. It's really important for us to enhance our visitor experience. And we can do that with the majority of our hotels outside of the downtown area and the university. The opportunity to rent or use these type of devices to get from the hotels to the community is really important in enhancing our visitor experience. I know a number of you have been on inner city visits with the Alliance, and everyone that we've gone to recently has had some type of program in place where they have these rentable devices. And I know it can be done. I've seen it at a lot of other communities in addition to those, but I just ask that you keep that piece in mind as you look at this, that how we can enhance our visitor experience through these devices and do it in a smart way.
Could you you say you want to encourage these options? Would you define what you mean? What options?
Well, I'm mostly referring to the rentable options.
But I mean, is it a rentable bike? Is it a rentable scooter? Is it a rentable hoverboard? What are you
I'm
advocating
referring
for?
more to scooters and e-bikes. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make
Yep.
If you're saying just e-bikes or just scooters or.
Yeah, I lumped them all together into scooters in my mind, but as Pa said, it's a tough thing to define. But yeah, that's more or less what I'm looking at is scooters and e-bikes.
Yeah. Council's gotten some communication from some constituents that have clarified there's a big difference between the two, e-bikes and scooters, and what it can do in terms of, not from you, but from potentially a safety or clutter situation. I want to find out what you were saying. So you clarified. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Ron?
I'm Ron Ritz. I'm from Skunk River Cycles. I also ride a bike frequently. I've enjoyed riding in Ames for more than 50 years. It's a great place to ride a bike. I remember when 13th Street was a gravel road and I'd ride to campus. Now it's a wonderful trail to get to campus. It's a great place to go more than 30 miles an hour downhill. So, so limitations on speeds with e-bikes. I sell e-bikes. I have sold scooters. To me, bikes are way more fun, and I think they offer a great deal more safety. I understand what Kevin's speaking about leaving an opportunity for the mix of different kinds of hoverboards, skateboards, scooters, bicycles, because they all offer recreational potential for everybody to use at certain points of their life. Limitations as far as speed goes. Jerry addressed the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. Frequently at the store, I'll have 4 or 5 questions I'm asked about electric bikes. Number one is often, well, how fast will they go? And somebody that's maybe my age that hasn't ridden a bike in 30 years or something like that, and I'll say, they'll go 20, but you should probably go 12. If you haven't ridden a bike at 15 miles an hour in traffic, you probably shouldn't be doing that sort of riding. But a couple of weeks ago, addressing the mixed traffic needs. A Sunday afternoon, it was a gorgeous day. I told my wife I just had to go for a bike ride, and my typical ride is access the outside of the town through going through Ada Hayden, and I've forgotten how wonderful it was, and also the mix of traffic, dog walkers, skaters, runners, walkers walking four abreast and so forth. I thought, well, this is a great place to ride a bike, but not a great place today to ride a bike. So mixed traffic like that, you do have to take that in concern. If there's a speed limit that's posted, that might be a good recommendation. I don't think there's a really good way to enforce it, but one of the things I frequently see around town is the speed limit signs that are blinking, flashing. You're now going 27 miles an hour. The speed limit's 25. I think things like that on trails that would be speed limit reminders would be fairly easy to install. And I think when someone sees that, they'll say, oh, okay, I'm probably going a little bit faster than my skill set or maybe this environment allows. That would be one easy way to be anyway to address the self-controlling of speed attempts on mixed traffic uses. Ada Hayden, I think I talked to Tim a couple of days ago, and it is a great place to go, and it's a great place as a recreational feature. It is a loop, so you have a way in and a couple of ways out, like getting on and off a merry-go-round. Other trails in Ames, I'm looking forward to the connectedness of the city. That is one of the complaints I frequently hear as a bike shop owner and somebody that I really like Ames. It's a great place to live. I like directing traffic to downtown stores and places to go that are on the edge, like Tedesco Learning Corridor or just the bike trail along the Skunk River, but they really don't go anyplace. So I think putting a focus on connecting those trails as a transportation and a recreational potential is also key to this micro-mobility thing, rather than making everybody go on the road, because bikes are not really necessarily always made for on the road, but for moving you through space at a speed or a comfort zone that you would appreciate. So as far as regulations, that's going to be, I think, an evolutionary thing that other cities have seen, and rather than casting it in stone and saying this is it, I think some kind of a way out or an option for the code writers to have accessibility, like Kevin had mentioned, for future events. Right now, I think I've been asked in the past about, oh, why don't we have a bike rental program, or like other big cities have. There are a lot of complications of that. I'm not really willing to take it on, but that is something that maybe a specialty organization that would like to provide intercity transportation could accept as their role in town, because we are getting to be a much bigger community than we used to be. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
So Ron, if I could.
Yeah.
So one comment, one question.
Yeah.
So first of all, we don't have an opportunity to say thank you very much. Ron has done just tremendous work in our community for many years, behind the scenes, education on bike safety, helping to outfit kids with bike helmets. I mean, just the list goes on and on. And so this is an opportunity for us to say thank you to you for all the work you've done in our community. But I have a specific question. So I am very interested in your opinion specifically about areas of potential conflict like an Ada Hayden or Brookside. How would you help us to think about compatibility of use? Are there certain types of devices that we should just outright ban, or should we be focusing on limitation of speed?
One of the considerations is, since we do bicycle repairs, I'm appalled by bicycles that don't have brakes. I'm also concerned about hoverboards. I don't quite know how they work. One of the standing rules of the bike shop is I don't skateboard. I'd really like to skateboard. And if someone comes in with a longboard, I say, man, sweet longboard. If I ask to borrow it, tell me no, because I don't know how to use one. But things like that have no controllability as far as stopping for a casual user. If someone wants to come and rent a hoverboard, do they have skills? Do they have or a Segway, for example? Segway is not a new product, but it has been used in larger communities for utility uses and even transportation uses. I know I've been in larger metro areas, and there would be a gaggle of Segways and a tour director. And it's pretty humorous watching a new Segway user only go in circles. So something like that, where the opportunity for lack of control is greater than the ability to control. Is so as far as outright banning, I don't know what's going to be in the future as far as transportation use. I don't know how the hoverboards work, so maybe there is a control that will have a kill switch, but that's something that I couldn't adjust on that. Bikes have handbrakes; they stop very quickly. Inline skates, I have inline skated in the past as well. It's kind of fun, but that's a concern on that part too. So how do you lump in inline skaters? I have customers that do marathon skate sessions and they'll skate at 20 plus miles an hour. So can you ban those users as well? It doesn't fit in this micro mobility issue. So I don't think there's a blanket answer for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay,
Thanks, Ron.
thank you.
Anybody else?
Travis Tolliver again. Just a note as a e-device user myself, just for the council to remember that it is in the best interest of the driver to not go the maximum speed of the device, because you're able to utilize the device longer. So you're able to get further distance if you're not, utilizing the motor to its maximum pace. So most e-scooters or e-bike riders that I know are typically not trying to maximize the speed so that they can get further down the path. So just wanted you to have that perspective as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll close public input. All right, so you need some direction tonight, Pa.
One more question. Has there been communication with Iowa State yet on this, or how would our micromobility ordinance affect what campus has as their guidelines?
So I think that ISU has the rights to determine what happens on their premises. So it would be up to them whether they adopted our whatever we adopt here, or if they have different rules put into place. But we like I said, this is a start, so we haven't necessarily reached out to them and say, hey, what pieces of micromobility do you like or not?
Okay.
That's a great question. And I think whatever we come up with, we should also include their rules in our, if it's posted on our website or wherever these rules can be found. I think it would be really important to reference what ISU is doing.
Yeah,
'Cause
'cause I think a lot of students are the ones that own personal transportation devices and different things like this. And especially if we have very different rules than are on campus, it might be hard for people to keep track.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, there is there's in the the council packet. There's kind of like a leaflet that has a summation of what council or what Iowa State's some of the regulations are as well too. I don't know, Emily, can you comment? I think if I remember right, student government is really not very supportive of they're concerned about safety in terms of the hoverboards and the speed of some of these e-scooters. Is that correct? Or
I don't know how concerned student government is individually, but I do know that there's signs where you can use your bicycle and whatnot, and most of the paths where students are walking, it's walking only. We don't want any. I mean, I myself have personally seen two individuals crash with one on a one wheel and one on a bicycle, and it was on a walking path only. So I think, it definitely will be important to put the university guidelines on the website, like Bronwyn said, but I don't know of any personal individual student government concerns, but this was a student government event when I saw that crash, so I imagine student government is kind of more on the side of we should be careful with what's on those paths.
Well, I think Iowa State only allows bikes on roads that cars can be on for the most part. So any walking path on campus is not allowed to, you're supposed to walk your wheels. And I like the signage they have about walk your wheels. And that was, I think, a point that someone who had emailed brought up with us about we need to think about good signage no matter what we do. Because to Tim's point about enforcement, that is tricky. And so we're relying more on the social pressure element of these rules, I think, in terms of having them just be the community expectation than we are on the realistically being able to enforce them. So good signage, I think that was a great point. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to mention too, I think that, we want to start with, and I would like to encourage us to start with something and then agree that we will fine tune it down the road, because I think we could really get into the weeds on, well, this street needs to be this mile an hour and this place needs to be this mile, where we could just get started and then see where hot spots develop. Because I think there is, there are limiting factors when you're on a bicycle. So, we're talking about speed you would ride on a sidewalk, for example. Well, as a bicycle user, if you're on a sidewalk, they're so rough and bumpy, and there's cracks and there's driveway cutouts. You'd be hard pressed to be able to go 15 miles an hour without crashing your bicycle on most sidewalks. So a lot of it'll be self-limiting. I kind of liked the proposal about 20 miles an hour because it is a state standard as well. Maybe then though maybe we start something in place, but then we hear a lot of feedback where it's either too fast or too slow for a given place, right? And we could tweak that over time. That would kind of be my preference, I guess, rather than figure out a map right now of where all these speeds would occur.
So why don't you walk us through the questions, or walk council the questions, and if we can try and give you some general ideas versus being super specific. And then I think if I can start crafting something, I agree that this is the start. We'll go back and forth and back and forth and get public feedback. And I'm sure engage the Ames Bicycle Coalition, other stakeholders that might be interested in giving feedback. But I'm just concerned. I don't think we want to spend the next half an hour saying, well, on this street and that street, we can't do it. You want some general guidelines,
Yeah,
correct?
correct.
Why don't you go ahead and walk council through what you'd like to have.
Mayor, could I ask one clarifying question first?
Sure.
So Pa, I asked you yesterday about ADA mobility devices, like LARCs and things like that you, I think, carved out because they weigh too much, so they aren't part of the ordinance. But then you came back and talked about them and about restrictions on carrying additional people on them. So I'm trying to figure out where they fit into this ordinance. Are we discussing them or are we not discussing them? Because they aren't part of the definition of those mobility devices that you established at the start of the presentation.
So I think our staff recommendation is that ADA mobility devices, that we create a process in place to allow ADA mobility devices. Those come in all shapes and sizes. And so typically they could fall under that 150-pound threshold or not. And so really, I think that the exception piece allows us to look at that type of device uniquely, which is why we're recommending that it be put in there.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Paul.
So really the three questions is, the first one is really, where should bicycles and personal transportation devices be allowed or not allowed? So as I mentioned in the code right now, there's already some areas where it's restricted, where bicycles are restricted. So you can't ride on the sidewalks in the downtown and campus area, and then in some parks, and then you can't ride on the roadway on Grand Avenue. So really the question is, at this point, does council want to identify any additional restrictions or restricted areas?
And do you want motions on these, or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and, if we can try and keep it all together in one motion, that'd be good, but why don't you go ahead and talk?
Yeah, I would move that we maintain the current rules about where bicycles are allowed and not allowed to operate, and extend that to other personal transportation devices.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So South, bicycles ride on South Duff, south of Lincoln Way.
Yes.
It's a state highway, and you can ride in the. I don't know to answer that
I
question. So
believe so.
because
Yeah.
Grand is. I wonder why.
Grand, you can't. I wondered that too.
Wonder
in terms
why
of
Grand and
why.
not South Duff. I was just
Yeah,
curious.
I don't know. That's
Okay,
a good
all right.
question.
There is a section, there's a specific section where it's prohibited on Grand.
Yep. Okay.
The second piece is, should there be speed limits?
Wait, we got a motion in a second. We haven't voted on that yet, and you got a question.
Well, so it seems like this is a very, very big motion. Bicycles, I understand, but are there any limits on personal transportation devices that you would
So
want to see?
I'm saying we would limit the places that are currently off limits to bicycles would also be off limits to personal transportation devices. So sidewalks on Main Street and in Campus Town, riding on the roadway on Grand.
Yeah.
And then was there another one? I forget.
Nope, that's it, parks.
But certain parks where bikes are already prohibited. So just where bikes are prohibited, I'm extending that to all other personal transportation devices, with the exception of ADA devices that we might carve out. But I'm not
That's
adding
the
any
place
new
to start.
because, again, I just want to get something on the books and then we could fine tune. And, I get what you're saying about Ada Hayden and users out there. I do think we are planning to widen the path out there and add a dividing line. So we have some environmental changes that will be coming to Ada Hayden that I think will abate some of the issues that you see out there. And again, signage. I think that's my.
Yeah, so the signage is, we absolutely should do more signage. I agree with that. But I have cautions. This is an opportunity for us to take stock of what we're going to allow. And I'm going to specifically say Ada Hayden just because it is the most popular park. I worry about devices, as I said, chasing current pedestrians off Ada Hayden. I worry about that because it can easily happen and then it becomes an autobahn. And the rules that we're implementing tonight would allow that.
Well,
I thought the parks were being considered separately. Is that right? We're going to get separate input
No.
about parks?
Her motion is
Oh.
saying,
Where they're currently allowed, where
Okay,
bicycles are
sorry.
currently allowed, we would allow other personal transportation devices. Because in my mind, you could damage a pedestrian just as much on a pedal-only, unassist powered bicycle as you could on rollerblades or as you could on a one-wheeled device. So if we're gonna allow bicycles, just plain bicycles, unpowered at Ada Hayden, I don't know that it's fair to limit the other devices.
yeah, I don't have the same need like to apply equal protection clause philosophy to treat everyone the same. I think we can say that certain devices. So the cyclists that are interested in speed don't go out to Ada Hayden.
Right.
So but yeah, and maybe I'm just afraid of the unknown and I'm willing to spot you on that. I think the bikes, and I do agree that as we add infrastructure to Ada Hayden, a lot of this will be of help tremendously. But I have trouble supporting this in such an open-ended way when we have so many pedestrians out there, Bronwyn, that I'm out. I don't know what councils, how often they get out there. I'm out there once a week at least. And so I see this usage.
I do understand. I think we are not about to allow anything new that is not currently allowed, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're not opening up allowances for more devices to use Ada Hayden. They already have that right. I think I want it to be simple. I want people to be able to look at our rules and not have to know, well, at Ada Hayden, I can't have my one wheel, but at Brookside, I can. But in camp, I like the simplicity of just saying where bikes aren't allowed, neither are personal transportation.
And Keith's come up. I mean, could we just hear a word from Keith? If you have a recommendation, this is your park.
Well, it's not his park, but
But
he's
sort of his park.
Gee, when did you take ownership of that? We'll let you go ahead.
It's a park for everybody, but I would just a couple of things. One, and some of this might be taken care of by speed limits and so on, but I would echo what you're saying, Tim. There are, we get calls every year where we have people on bicycles, and I agree with you, Brown, when it could be a person on just a regular bicycle running into somebody. It could be somebody on an e-bike. We have, people going and somebody with their dog, they got them on a leash and it's a suspended leash, and then that leash crosses the path, and then all of a sudden somebody hits that. There are a lot of issues and out at Ada Hayden, but we have people that have said to us, we don't go there anymore, because when you got somebody that's going out there, an elderly person with a walker, it's not safe. And whoever, Tim, if you made the comment about that, the people that are going for speed, don't go out there, that's false. Because, I have seen it. Friends of Ada Hayden have seen it. They had an educational session going on last year, and there was a guy that coming through racing way too fast and then making comments telling them, you guys need to get off the trail. So even what Pa had mentioned about bikers, yield to pedestrians and stuff, there are people that don't follow that aspect. So it's really, with all of this, it's safety should be what really drives, what we're doing. And that's the tough thing, with this, because again, we have a lot of different situations, and with the one wheels, and, just for clarification, with the widening of the path going from 10 to 12, putting the line down the middle at Ada Hayden, what we're thinking, hey, wheels on the outside, feet on the inside, so they go. Now, we will have people with wheels that will be coming in opposite directions. They'll have to figure that out. They'll have to yield. Some are going to do it, some aren't. One of the things that was in the report, right now, the Parks and Recreation Commission has asked us to look at all of our park rules and our policy. Some of those are ordinances, and there are some things that we need to clean up. Some of them are just park rules. I will say sometimes the park rules, they are very effective. We talk about no bonfires. We don't have any issues with bonfires. People see some of those and say, hey, it's a park rule. We're not going to do it. You're always going to have that segment of the population that is going to go faster than the speed limit, is going to do something that they aren't supposed to. But I think what we have to do is we have to really look at how do we put things in place that will keep people safe. And in some cases, I think some of our parks, it may mean that some devices just aren't safe to be used. And it's really, what do we want to do, as a council, as a commission, as staff, for some of the areas that we have. So,
Okay, so then it's almost an hour. What I'd like to do is a question, and then also some clarification. One is, if Tim, if the parks were a separate item, would Brown's motion be satisfactory for you? I'm not trying to basically placate anybody, but more or less, is your big concern the park system?
It absolutely is.
Okay, so here's what I'm wondering is if you somehow clarify that yours is everything but the parks, and then something that council refers to the Park and Recreation Commission for them to look at and maybe develop some, because they know there's the park system, well, and Keith just articulated really well, what they are aware of. Ask them to weigh in on it and come back to council with some suggestions on what they think would do that we could wrap into this ordinance. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I would amend my motion.
Is that?
Are they already looking at it?
Well, if they are, then
They're
they're prescient. They're already ahead of us. But anyway.
I would
They're
amend
looking
my
at park
motion
rules
to-
overall.
Okay.
Sorry, Paul had something.
They're looking at park rules overall, so this would be included in that.
So then, is there any idea when those might be coming? That would include use of trails, is that right? Or
Yeah,
other
yeah,
paths?
everything that's associated with the park. So we're looking at, we were maybe hoping to get something to them in March. It'd probably be more like April.
Okay, so the next month or two then you'll have some.
Yep.
And then that's going to them. Is that going to be for review and action, or they're going to start discussing it and they'll take a while to get back to it?
No, we were hoping to move through it fairly quickly.
Okay.
We are going to have some public input as well with it.
Okay.
And again, so just to, again, for everybody's information, park rules can be established by the commission. If it has to do with an ordinance, they can make a recommendation to city council. So just so everybody's aware of, that's what goes. But
Would they have more teeth if they were an ordinance versus a park rule?
oh, they would be.
Okay.
But again, then you have the enforcement issue.
Okay.
You know, so that's a concern that you've already talked about.
Okay, go ahead, Robin. You want to amend something?
Oh, I amended my motion to be what you said.
So just removing the parks from the,
And referring the parks part to Parks and Rec Commission.
Okay. all right? Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
No, wait a minute, Mayor, wait. I didn't get a chance to weigh in on this.
Sorry.
My concern is actually smaller mobility devices like the one wheels, skateboards that are being used in the streets in our busier areas. And I have concerns that is creating a liability situation for drivers who are dealing with users who do not see themselves as motor vehicles. Typically, bicyclists see themselves as some sort of vehicle that needs to adhere to road rules. But my impression from around campus in Campus Town is that the users of these mobility devices that have smaller wheels, which are more susceptible to potholes and every other kind of rough road, do not necessarily see themselves as needing to adhere to the rules of the road because they aren't bikes and they aren't cars. So I'm not going to support the motion as it stands because this has been a long-running concern of mine. But I recognize that others may also not have those same concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone understand the motion? Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carried. All right,
The second item is, should there be speed limits? If so, where and what? So any additional speed limits you guys want to put in place or some guidance on that today?
Keith, do you have input for us on this?
Well, this would come with the recommendations too.
Yeah, you know, with what you just passed, you know, we can look at that. Some of the conversations that we've been having is 10 miles per hour within the parks as a speed limit. And with the information that was shown earlier, you know, Minneapolis, you know, park system has 10 miles per hour, you know, in the park system. I think Ron's comments were really good when he said, you know, how fast, when people ask him how fast do they go, 20 miles an hour, but you shouldn't go more than 12. You know, so I think there's some wisdom in Ron, who's been doing this for a very long time. And Jerry's comments, you know, with safety. So that's just what we've been talking about and discussing within the park system. I know there are some situations where through Brookside, you know, that is kind of, you know, people do use that for commuting. You know, is that treated different? I don't know, because, you know, there are some curves and things of that sort. But anyways, that's what we have been discussing, you know, right now. But again, we can have more discussion, conversation, and bring something back to the council related to speed limits within the parks.
I have a secret helpline tonight. I have my son Peter is up in the Twin Cities, and I asked him about the practice around the lakes, because they have a phenomenal park system around their lakes. and they have a 10 mile, as you point out, 10 mile. And generally, he feels that people are very considerate, but if there's a time when people aren't around, then they have a little more flexibility to go faster. And so I think this is where some common sense comes in. I like what the suggestion of having a 10 mile, but recognizing that some of this is going to be based on the responsibility of the cyclist.
10 miles an hour everywhere or 10 miles an hour in the park?
In the parks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to give some direction on should there be speed limits? If so, where and what?
I would move that we direct staff to proceed with the 20 mile an hour general speed limit.
Non-park.
Well,
Except-
we'll hear about parks.
Except in parks.
Except parks.
Except with parks.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
And then again, I think, this is one where if we hear of hot spots where it's really important that people have the ability to go faster, then we can look at those, maybe create a map of them. If there are some bike arterials, so to speak, so.
Gloria, you have any questions or comments on this one?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. And then last question.
Allowing for exceptions, so mobility devices and parades, if we include that in the proposed ordinance.
I would move that we include exceptions.
There a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, move second. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carried. Is there anything else that the two of you need from us tonight?
I don't think so. We'll take the feedback that you've given us. We'll work on a draft. Again, we'll put it out for public feedback and get some input from the community around this before we bring a draft ordinance back to you all. So
I was going to suggest, I don't know if you want a motion for this, but to include some possible signage concepts. We've talked about the importance of
Go ahead and
signage.
make a motion on that.
I would move that staff include in this proposal some signage concepts.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carried. Good catch. That was I guess heard that a number of times from people. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Actually, it'd be really nice to have an integrated signage system
Yeah.
throughout the community. Would be directional wayfinding.
Wayfinding, like a wayfinding.
Oh my gosh. Anyway,
They're on it. I think we got the
different-
machines now. It's gonna.
different topic. Okay. All right. You good to go?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and pick up on item number 38.
Oh,
All right, move on to item number 38, resolution awarding a contract to Clara Technologies. Good evening, Curtis.
Good evening, council. I know it's getting kind of late, so I'll make this brief. But so this item's for awarding contract for advanced metering infrastructure, otherwise known as AMI. The project will be performed in 3 different phases. First phase will be a pilot that will start immediately and end around fall, winter this time with a system acceptance. And then phase 2 will be the large equipment change out where we change out all the meters. We did initially think that we would change them out with our meter technicians. However, that would take quite a while, 7 to 10 years. We want to see the benefits of the system much quicker. And so we have, within this contract, we'll be accelerating that meter change out, and it'll take about 2 years. So we'll be able to start seeing those system benefits. Phase 3 is not a part of the funding that we're asking council tonight. Phase 3 will be load switches that we can incorporate with the AMI, and that will be funded later on out of our annual O&M budget that will ask for approval later on. So we, with that acceleration, we do have the available fund balance to handle that. And so tonight we're looking for council to approve funding for phase 1 and 2. So with that,
It was actually in the CIP. We're just sliding those forward.
That's right. Yeah.
So
So
how are we going to do it if it was have to be budgeted in future years? We're just going to take out of the balance to do that. It
Yeah,
won't
thanks.
affect rates over the long period.
that's right.
Questions? I see that they were trying to twin the water meter with the electric meter, but that it was pretty expensive. Can you comment on what, is that something that can be added in the future? So there's a integration there, or how does that work?
Yes. Yes. So the system overall will be able to support both water and electric. And they will need 2 separate meters because they're obviously 2 different types at the house or the business. But so the electric side, all the meters will be changed out and the funding will support that. Water, they will have 1,200 meters changed out, and then they'll continue to support that within their annual budget for change out going forward.
So this is something you may not be able to answer, but it seems like technology is changing so much, and your SCADA, SCADA system, you're spending lots of money every 3-4 years, understandably, because you got to keep it up. What have they talked about in terms of the ability for this to be upgraded, or that you're spending $7-8 million? I mean, we are investing. Comment on that, because it's a huge amount of money and we're getting tied into one vendor. And is there risks that might come back to bite us long term?
Good question. Absolutely. So a part of the proposal process in evaluating that, we wanted to make sure that we understood that the meters that we chose were able to be somewhat universal. And so we're not married to a specific system provider. And so that there is abilities within what we are doing for the type of meters that we're choosing. The other portion is this contract does support a hosted service. And so the servers and things that are going to be hosting are within the cloud. And so that service will continue to have to be paid for by us. And so there is an annual cost that we're agreeing to for so many years. And after the second year, it'll be in our operating and maintenance budget for that annual cost. And so that will include upgrades and ongoing service of that hosted service. Now, any meter, there is warranty of 4 years around the meters themselves. And then beyond that, we would continue to have to do maintenance ourselves.
So is that the about $400,000 a year for just by I read it was just for hosted service costs, and then is there an additional $400,000 a year for this DSM on top of it?
No. So the 390,000 includes the hosted service, and then also within that is, I think, around 160,000 for the customer portal. And so there's different abilities that the customer will be able to see and view from their meter as well that we'll be able to extend as part of our service. That 390 stays; it doesn't grow. So that's the expected annual cost each year, starting in the second year.
And are these meters like read by a satellite, or do you have to drive around with a vehicle, or how is that information downloaded? So are we saving some money in terms of meter readers going around and manual entry, or trying to do things? Is there some net savings or some?
Yeah, this is wonderful. You're asking all the right questions. This is exactly the system that we're going for. So it is it's a mesh network. So we'll have different towers throughout the city, 17 to be exact, and that'll be able to read both the water and the electric meters. So we no longer have to go out to the site and collect those readings. We'll be able to have all of that collected to one spot within electric, and then we'll have a data manager to be able to input all that data, understand it, and then use it for many different cases for ourselves. So it also allows us to understand a lot more of what's going on within the house, within those feeders, in real time that we do not currently have. And so that'll be very helpful.
And then is this DSM, is that right now you have like a prime time where you can actually shut down people's air conditioners for a short period of time to try and reduce some of the peak demand? Is that the same thing that you're looking to work towards, that these meters would allow you to control it also, or how's that work?
That's right. Yeah. So the demand side management program, it uses that prime time power, like you're saying. It's still on a volunteer basis where we have these boxes that are connected to the air conditioners, and it's on a rotating equipment, very mechanical. where that's how we shed some of that load during peak times. So our AMI system will be much simpler design, and that's where the load management switches would come in later on. And so we'll fund that as people desire or volunteer to hook up to their systems. We'll use that very similarly to the primetime power.
And so you said that, so these meters are non-proprietary then, is that right? That, so if you haven't, I'm just thinking about 5-6 years from now, if the meters start going bad, that we're not locked into an Clara or whatever, that we could get someone else to come in and not basically negate this whole system, or, oh, I'm sorry. Because I mean, I'm just thinking about it when I was practicing and we had direct digital control systems, and it's, once you get locked into a vendor, sometimes if it's not non-proprietary, it costs you a lot of money on the long term. So I was just trying to help think through, is that possible? And maybe it's not possible in the electric meter realm. I'm talking about a different system altogether.
Yeah, we hired a consultant to help us with that, just because it's a very complex world to try to figure out all the devices and things. And that was one element that we were really looking for, to try to go to a system that is used by many and that is understood by many for providers. And so that's something that we're very conscious with, and we're trying to make sure that we're not just putting ourselves in one basket and it being monopolized.
And then concluding question is just, so what's the lifespan of a meter? Is that something that you have to replace meters anyway, right? Electric meters that are on houses or businesses anyway. So same kind of a life cycle and same kind of anticipated, replacement cost over time?
We do regularly replace them. I do not have the exact answer for that. And actually, Ken, who's over the meter division, would say, do you need me tonight? And this is exactly the question that he would be able to answer. But yeah, the expectation is that they would definitely last as long as the current meters now. And that was something that we looked at when we were thinking about trying to roll it out over a longer period of time, is would we be able to catch up because of the life of the meter? But I don't want to throw out a number, but I can definitely get that for you.
No, I was just thinking that if they had a shorter life expectancy for some reason because of the intricacies, or maybe even longer because of new technology, the way that it's reading. But just trying to, I think all of us are in the same position, wanting to keep the cost down for our customers, and that's where the money's coming from. But it sounds like a pretty cool system that gives a lot of flexibility, a lot of data, and also saves on going out and getting information and downloading it. So thanks, Curtis. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I love the mayor's tire kicking. I have, I think, one question. Just imagine we just didn't do this. It's a lot of money. Help us think about the cost benefit analysis. Like where is the payoff? So we have status quo. We can understand that. But at what point is it possible to quantify it? Because some of these benefits are qualitative in nature, in that it's giving us flexibility for the system that we don't have now. So I will spot you that some of this analysis is going to be difficult because we're comparing probably sort of in some ways apples and oranges. But from the metering perspective, at what point does this investment, is there a payoff point for the community?
That is a difficult question to answer. I would say that there's many different benefits that are going to be tangible. I mean, the just not having to go out and read the meters. There's a lot of time, even just disconnects and reconnects, and all the time that goes into, and the staff time to try to make sure to facilitate that as quick as possible and as efficient as possible. That can be done with one person clicking the button, and it can be quickly done by our customer service, which is going back and forth between departments. We can understand our feeder loading, which is tremendous from an engineering perspective. We know and understand and we can anticipate some issues before they happen. And so I don't know if that's easily quantifiable, but it's definitely from a reliability perspective, it will help us. And I think it's almost, it is more of an answer as to when we would go to this system rather than if, just because I think that the industry is phasing out of the older design. And so more of an understanding of when the energy is being used and where and how is definitely something that we need as far as our decisions going forward.
And I appreciate.
Let me add another issue.
Yeah, please.
Picture this. We have your load demand, right? Your load demand looks like this.
Right.
So you have to you purchase capacity, or you build capacity to meet that 1 or 2 hour peak.
Right.
But your load on these off hours are not utilized. You have all that capacity, it's not utilized. With time of day metering, we'll be able to shift through a price signal so we can fill in the gap. The ideal load manager is like this, right? So we'll be able to now send a pricing signal for these off hours. So we want to utilize the capacity we have available. If we don't, we just keep building more and more for those 2 hour, 3 hour peaks. So it helps fill in that. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
I don't have the exact number. For every megawatt we expand for capacity, it's millions of dollars. $7 million is nothing if we keep raising our peak and don't have people shift to the off peak and utilize that unused capacity. Time of day metering allows you to do that. Without it, you cannot do that.
And
That makes sense?
It does. And so Steve's point is I think going really to the heart of my concern is that this is very difficult to do a cost benefit analysis because you have to take into account the capacity issues.
It's kind of easy to do.
And you think,
I think it's easier to do if I show you if we keep raising our peak and paying for it there versus delaying or raising the peak and filling in the unused time. I can show you how we save our customer millions of dollars.
are there savings in terms of staffing? Would there be fewer staff needed to do this kind of work then?
I think, there's going to shift to, now we're going to have to analyze the data and things. And so I think that the staffing hours will shift to something else as far as what we're going to need to do for analyzing. But
You're saying in the future, we need less meter readers. I would think that's possibly so. Some will shift to a new type of job. Others will be handled through attrition, probably. It's not going to happen next day, so we'll have time to fill in or deal with that with attrition.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have 3 or 4 years before we have to worry about that.
The other item on the capacity piece that Steve's speaking to, I would say, replacement capacity is $1.5 to $2 million every megawatt.
Yeah.
We have, whenever we peak on our peak days, I would say it's around 5 days of the year that we're threatening to push up into new amounts of demand. And those other days outside of the 5 days, 360 days of the year, we're well below 5 to 10 megawatts below that peak demand. And so if we can spread out that load, that's millions and millions of dollars of like what Steve is talking about that we can save our customers.
Yep. Thank you both.
So are these also, these give you feedback on how much solar is being put back into the system also? Solar, because we're going to, one thing we're trying to do is get more solar panels on people's roofs. And then before you and Don have been here, talk about, reverse metering or net metering or whatever it is. These are all compatible and figuring it out, and also allow you to kind of get an idea of how much coming back in your. So you should get some real time data.
Yeah. I don't know if it's to the second. I don't think we've set up the system to be able to read it to that, but to the minutes that we can receive it. So now it's every month, so we can get down to within the hour to be able to understand how much energy is being pushed back onto the grid, like with solar, or being demanded by the customer.
Cool.
They'll be priced accordingly.
Yeah. It just seems it's just giving you, it's going to make you more intelligent about what's going on as we get more electric cars that are getting charged or other things on the system. We've talked about that before.
That's right.
It just seems the ability to be analyzing and trying to help. I mean, it's a pretty complex equation here that we're working with. But
Curtis is pretty intelligent now, though.
Don't compliment them too much.
You know,
They can.
the time of use rates will be pretty, you know, to be able to help the customer
Yes.
understand in that way what the utility is working to do at the price point within the energy being used at that hour is great. We really want to provide that information.
Okay. All right, we'll open up public input. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic tonight? Seeing none, I close public input. Is there a motion on the alternatives?
Move alternative one.
Second.
Thank you. Which is to award the contract to Clara Technologies. All right, roll call.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Very good. Thanks, Curtis. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, move on. Item number 39. Hearing on 30-year lease agreement with Ames Youth Sports Complex, Inc. for city property. Good evening, Brian.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. We're here to discuss the extension of a lease agreement that has been longstanding in this community, wherein the city furnishes some land that's otherwise not very suitable for development to the Ames Youth Sports Complex Incorporated, which provides a youth sports programming at a cost that the city would otherwise not be able to provide the same programming. I want to make sure that there are a couple of notes that get into the record about the value of this arrangement, because this is a little bit unusual compared to how we might otherwise provide land to, say, the highest bidder. We have identified that this arrangement provides value to the community. It enhances the characteristics of a community that wants to attract and retain people to live here, to work here, to raise families here. And so having recreational amenities like this is important for economic development purposes for the city. It's important that we make that connection. And we have worked over the last several months with a variety of different city departments to evaluate this lease arrangement, to update it from the terms that were first set out 30 years ago and then subsequently amended in the early 2000s. And we believe that we've got a lease agreement that works well for all the interested parties and addresses the needs of the youth in the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? All right. Declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing to be closed. Is there a motion?
So just to clarify on that point, Brian, we don't have to go through any kind of a public bidding process on this.
No.
Okay. I'll move alternative one.
Thank you. Which is approve the attached 30-year lease agreement.
Yes.
All right.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Very good. We will move on to item number 40, hearing on zoning text amendment to chapter 29 of the Ames Municipal Code, create town home building type standards. Good evening, Kelly.
So last week we talked about this, or last meeting, I should say, and we continue to tweak some of the language in the ordinance and to specifically address how multiple frontage or corner lots would be addressed. So we added some language where the planning director has discretion on how the design standards apply when there's multiple frontages. We cleaned up some of the other language in there. So we're recommending approval of the text amendment on first reading.
Questions for Kelly?
Do want to clarify the title says second reading, but it is first reading, and you did not approve this on first reading last time.
All right. Declare a public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, move on to item number 41, entertain a motion on second reading of amendment to section 2.45 of the municipal code, duties and powers of the city manager to authorize delegation of duties and powers.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. Move on to item number 42, entertain a motion on second reading to rezone property at 5119 and 5001 Lincoln Way from agricultural A to suburban residential low density FSRL with a master plan.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Didi Hanson.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
All right. And we have 5 items under disposition of communications to council. First one is a letter from the Iowa Department of Transportation on I-35 work significantly north from Ames, but
No actions needed. I think he just wanted to inform the city councils in the vicinity what's going to happen.
second is a request for safety regulations for bicycle taxi services from David Corneliuson, Des Bike Ped Cab. Is there any interest in asking staff to either for a memo and or to start working on some changes to ordinances on this item?
I'm unfamiliar with this as a problem, so I don't know how to proceed. It seems like a new topic. Do you have any thoughts on this, Bronwyn?
I don't know. I mean, the memo may be, I think we don't regulate car taxis. So I don't know our interest in regulating bike taxis, but,
I'm not
you know,
sure.
the letter writer mentioned that other cities, Iowa City and Des Moines specifically, have rules to require insurance and things like that. But I guess,
I was interested in the equipment, like if there are lights and
yeah, that too. Well, maybe I would move for a memo from staff.
second.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carried. All right, number 3, from the Home Builders Association, request for reevaluation of front yard parking regulations.
Wait, pardon me?
We want a memo from staff.
Okay, move for a memo.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So could you clarify, Steve? I don't remember when we last took this up. It wasn't that long ago.
Very long ago.
We did, but I don't think it really has to do with front yard parking per se. It has to do with the widening of the driveway.
Yeah, on older properties.
The widening of the driveway, I think, is the key issue.
Yeah.
That's why I think we'll deal with that if you get
Okay.
a memo.
Okay.
All right, those in
I don't
favor,
think you're undoing the key front yard parking.
Right.
Okay.
those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 4 is a memo from our building official regarding carbon monoxide alarms in rental properties.
You asked for this.
Yeah, this was my motion, and I want to commend Sarah for the thoroughness of this. I am interested in this. And in some ways, I'm sort of surprised. I feel badly. I thought that there was already some requirements that rental properties have a carbon monoxide detector. I'm very sensitive to unduly burdening the cost of rental properties, but the cost benefit of this gets really easy in terms of as a life-saving measure. So I don't know what other council members are interested in, but I think this is something we should explore.
Move to put it on a future agenda.
Yeah,
That, okay, move and seconded.
second.
Is there, do you want it to come back to council, or you want to just go ahead and ask
Oh,
legal to go ahead and just start working on adding this to our rental ordinances?
I thought maybe we'd have to decide that in a council meeting.
We'd have to approve a draft ordinance.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would
I'm fine with that.
I would move that we direct staff to bring us back a draft ordinance on this.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Those in
You
favor-
want us to communicate with rental property owners? Or
Oh, absolutely.
What do you want to do? You want us to do that?
You can tell them we're considering it.
So they'll be considering it. A memo to them is good enough.
I mean, part of our goal is getting a robust public input. But our number one role here, folks, is to keep these students safe. And not just students, but all the other people who are renting properties. And it's so inexpensive to put these in.
Yeah, we could probably give you that information too.
Well, and the other thing is, so many of the detectors anymore are dual.
Both. Yes, absolutely.
Carbon monoxide and smoke detector. I mean,
Yep.
we're talking about.
$20 difference, $40 difference.
All of the ones in my apartment are
Pardon me?
dual. All of the ones in my apartment are dual detectors. Yeah.
Already.
So it may be that
A lot of
the
them already.
market has already put that in place. Yeah.
I would
Which is-
venture to say a lot of the larger ones have made that change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You got the motion? All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed?
And maybe, Steve, if when she brings this back, it would be interesting to also look and see if other communities have adopted this. I'm going to guess that we are behind on this. My guess is that like in Iowa City or other communities that have high volume apartments are out in front of this. So I'm really excited to see us move this forward.
Part of your motion then is that we check with other cities to see what their rental.
If that needs to be, it's Bronwyn's motion, but
Bronwyn, you want-
I would think Sarah would do that anyway as
I
a
would
part
think
of
staff
her.
would do that as part of their due diligence.
Yep.
It doesn't need to be in the.
It's
Yeah.
and it's already noted in her report that every residential dwelling is required to be in compliance with these standards, and the ordinance would just be for enforcement.
Right.
So.
Okay.
For rental property.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Last is a email from Kate Gregory, suggestions regarding special use permit requirements.
You want a memo from us, staff on that?
Yep.
Well, is this, so now remind me, are staff bringing back already suggestions for special use permits? Like, would that be something they're developing in drafting?
This is special for
Social services.
social services.
I see. So it wouldn't, I mean, because we had moved to have it be a special use permit process.
There's a different criteria I think they're suggesting.
I see. Okay. Sure.
Is there a motion?
Different criteria. I think what's being suggested is different criteria than the criteria that is in place now for special use permits. Right?
So I'll move that we get a memo from staff that explores this proposal compared to our existing standard.
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, report of governing body. Anything from Discover Ames tonight?
We have not met.
Okay. Ames Regional Economic Alliance.
I'm trying to remember the good stuff. It's good news, all good news, developments, and the Daisy plant is coming along and things like that. I didn't take notes though, so I don't have good details, sorry.
Okay.
I took notes.
Oh, thank you for,
So,
thanks.
I think the things that are probably most pertinent are that we all should have gotten an email about the one-day tour of rec centers in the area that Discover Ames is inviting us to. So you should check your email for that. And we also have been invited to the April 19th premiere of Are We There Yet? Which is a Discovery Channel show that is featuring Ames and the Ames area. Again, we should have gotten an email about that. The Alliance is expanding their Work in Ames website to now be a Live in Ames website. So they're adding live and play sections to that website to help to market the community more completely. And there's also a new podcast called the Area Pod, which I believe is now available through the Alliance if any of you are interested. As Bronwyn said, there were lots of announcements about things that are happening in other communities. I made sure to highlight for the attendees that we would like input from those people who may be impacted by homelessness in the community, whether they're business owners or property owners or residents who have encountered some of our homeless population, that we're looking for insights from them. And I hope that will result in some additional feedback that we can pass on to PA and whoever else may be working on this in the future. That's all I've got.
Thank you. There's no Story County Emergency Management meeting until next month. Transit.
We did not meet.
Okay. Council comments. Emily, I'll start with you.
So, the joint meeting is this month. It is the next day after our next city council meeting, so Wednesday the 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. in the Memorial Union Sunroom. I'm working on the agenda right now. I have all the topics set, but I just need to put the timelines in. So we're gonna have open discussion first, then we'll talk about downtown engagement, sustainability, and then Ames boards and commissions. And the goal with the Ames boards and commissions one is just to try and figure out how we can get more students involved, what's the awareness level, all that. And then recently, I think last week, I did a survey among the student government members about downtown and how often they go, how they get there, what they like to do, this, that, and the next thing, just to kind of guide our discussion on downtown engagement. So I'll share those results with you guys. But it was really eye-opening to me, so that'll be helpful for us, I think. We just finished the student government elections. The results came out last Friday, and so the president and vice president-elect are Colby Brandt and Will Vlasic. Will, if you're watching, I'm sorry if I got your pronunciation wrong. I just second-guessed myself in saying it right now. But
We can edit the tape.
yeah. Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
But inauguration is Monday, April 21st. I think you got an email maybe about being invited, perhaps, but I don't know. I've heard different things on that, so I don't know. But that'll be Monday, April 21st. So my term is ending.
What time is that?
They didn't tell me what time yet. I didn't look back in my email, so I'll ask them about that tomorrow and have them.
Thinking I might not be here, but I may end up being here. So
Okay.
anyway, so
I'll have them.
I'll check that.
Yeah,
again.
send something to you again. But yeah, so my term is coming up, and my intent is to reapply for this position. So
Yeah.
All right.
that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Do we get a vote?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Right.
I guess if you guys
Letters
want
of
to
support.
whisper something in the ears of the VP and President-elect on if I've been
Absolutely.
doing my job, then sure thing.
All right. Thank you so much. Rachel.
Yeah, so Emily kind of kicked off a good point with boards and commissions. We approved some appointments under the consent agenda on item 12. And in kind of looking at those, I saw that a lot of the appointees are incumbents. And so we've been doing some things lately to encourage different applicants to our boards. We studied the barriers that people have. We're adding questions on the residential satisfaction survey. So I'm wondering if we might be discouraging ourselves by continuing to appoint incumbents to roles when we could be giving other people a chance to serve on our boards and commissions. So I would move that we get a memo from the mayor and staff about application data and information about average term lengths for our boards and commissions, ordinances and legal requirements we must follow for different boards, and feedback from staff representatives or liaisons to the boards and commissions, and that they provide us with recommendations for various options we have to alter term lengths or selection processes for different boards to encourage participation.
I will second.
Got that great.
Rachel,
Mhm.
would that include the issue of reappointments after a certain number of years? Remember, I brought up that issue with the Historic Preservation Commission, that once you're off it, you can never be on it again, and we lose a lot of expertise. But I don't know if that applies to other commissions as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be good to include as part of this.
And
So that's a friendly amendment then?
yeah, and could another friendly amendment be looking at the number of people that serve?
I think we'll
with the
probably,
idea
I
that
think we'll
that
probably
would
look
be-
at that as part of
Okay.
our, I think,
Application data.
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And I'm certainly supportive of this. I will say that we'll probably have to look at the ordinance, because the ordinance does stipulate that on most boards and commissions, people are eligible for up to 2 consecutive 3-year terms. And if someone fills an unexpired term, let's say that someone moves away and you have an open seat, but there's still 2 years left, someone could serve for 8.5 years on a board or commission. And so I'm very supportive of the motion and doing a refresh on that. But it may require, if we want to change things, either increasing number of people on a board or commission, or changing the ordinance. And it can be done. If we start eliminating consecutive terms, then we'll have might have some wonkiness for a few years as we're kind of getting healed back onto a cycle of, because we try and stagger the terms so we don't have a full turnover, going on. But and then there might be a couple that are set forth by Iowa code that may also be. But we'll wrap that all into it. I think it's appropriate. I am encouraged by the number of people that do apply, and but we'll get that data for you, and we can have that on conversation coming up.
Awesome.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Anything else?
That's it for me.
Tim?
This is a fun time of year. We have some great ambassadors on behalf of Ames. We'll be playing tomorrow for the Big 12 tournament. So this is a great sort of a fun time for Ames and Iowa State. So we wish the Cyclone men well. It's a great time. The wrestling program had a great outing. And so a lot of good events for Cyclone sports. That's all I have tonight.
Okay.
Nothing for me.
Just safety for the students as they get ready to go on break, and that they return as well. So, yeah.
Nothing for me tonight, thank you.
Gloria?
I just want to let Emily know I will not be at the joint meeting because I teach on Wednesday nights. So I'll wish everyone a happy meeting on the 26th. And I hope that I will be joining you back on the dais soon.
Yes.
Okay. One thing going through the boards and commissions is our campus and community commission has basically become inactive. There's just no real charge right now. And so I would like to just put on a future agenda just a consideration on what we want them to do is option 1, or option 2 is maybe temporarily suspend that commission. I did not appoint someone to fill an open position because of the fact that it just hasn't met for a long, long time. So I'm not saying that it should be disbanded, but I think that they're just not meeting because they don't really know what they're expected to do. So I think it's appropriate to put it on a future agenda, have a conversation. I can work with either Pa or Brian or somebody and just kind of give a little background and get something going conversation-wise.
Do you need a motion for that? Or
Mhm.
I would move we put that on a future agenda.
Okay.
Second. Yeah.
Okay, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks.